Give me big old buckets of butterbeer. Give me big old barrels of butterbeer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here of the sweet old butterbeer.
Welcome to the Three Broomsticks. We invite you to pull up a chair, grab a butterbeer, and settle in for a hearty discussion about Harry Potter. I'm Irvin Cateman.
I'm Sophia Jenkins.
And I'm thrilled to reintroduce our two guests. They'll probably be familiar with to you if you like listening to Cormoran Strike discussion. Our first guest is Dr. Louise Freeman. Hi, Louise.
Hi.
Hello. So happy to be back.
So happy to have you back. Do you want to give listeners a quick refresher on, who you are and, your favorites in the fandom?
Sure. My name is Louise Freeman. I am a retired professor of psychology from Mary Baldwin University. Now I'm working as a behavior analyst and as a therapeutic consult. I have been doing Harry Potter and other young adult literature research for a number of years, focusing on psychological themes. And when Cormoran Strike came out, I jumped right into that one as well and really enjoy looking at that series. So that's why I'm happy to be here.
Excellent.
And proud Ravenclaw.
Whoop whoop.
My journey to Harry Potter, I discovered it when I was reading it aloud to my kids. My kids were the perfect Hogwarts generation, born in the late 1990s. So grew up with those, and I read the entire series aloud to both of them. My favorite book in Harry Potter, it varies. Currently, it's Order of the Phoenix, just because that's what I've written my most recent paper about. With Cormoran Strike, my favorite continues to be Lethal White, and that one has been pretty consistent.
Yes.
Current favorite Harry Potter characters, Professor McGonagall. As I've gotten older, I've shifted from Hermione to McGonagall as my favorite. And right now, I have to say Pat's my favorite from Strike.
Fair enough. And our second guest today is Dr. Beatrice Groves. So hello and welcome back to you as well.
Hello. Great to be here again. Thanks very much.
So we're happy to have you back as well. You want to give listeners a quick refresher?
Yeah. So I'm Beatrice Groves. I teach English at Oxford University, and I am a Raven Puff.
Yes, like all the best people are.
Right. I remember that we are together in that oven, which is really fun. My journey to Potter was a wedding gift. So I got married on the day that the fourth book came out, and someone gave me books 1 to 4 as my wedding present. She said, "I know you'll really like these," and she was right. So that was great.
That is a great wedding gift.
It's really good, isn't it? Mm-hmm. It means I can always remember when Goblet of Fire came out as well.
Yeah.
My favourite Harry Potter books are Deathly Hallows and Azkaban. Favourite Cormoran Strike is Troubled Blood, and again, I don't think that's going to change. For me, that's because of the epigraphs being from the Fairy Queen. So unless she does epigraphs from Shakespeare, Milton, Donne, Keats, there's a number of people I'm sort of hoping for, but unless that happens, that will stay the favourite, I suspect. Favourite characters are Hermione and Strike.
Excellent. I gotta say, we have a very pessimistic panel for the future of the Strike series. All of us are just like, no, the best books are behind us. Like, the last 3 couldn't possibly compare.
It's funny, but that didn't quite happen, because Troubled Blood's quite late, isn't it? So I have kind of, in that sense.
Yeah, well, my favorite is Ink Black Heart, so...
interesting
even later,
choice.
yeah.
Do you like Phoenix? Is that... I would have thought those two go together.
I mean, I thought... You think that Phoenix and Ink Black Heart go together?
Yeah, I think those are the two, they're really sort of dark ones of the series.
Yeah, I just love it because it's so, prescient. Like, I just feel like everything that's been going on the internet for the last, however much time can be summed up by Ink Black Heart. Like, I talk to people, about... the horror that is Twitter, and I'm like, there's this one book that you should really read. I'm like, you have to read the first 5 first for it to make sense, but you should really read it to like...
Right, okay. I find it very dark, obviously, that aspect, but also just the slight disconnect between the central characters and things. That links to me with the sort of emo Harry of Order of Phoenix.
Yeah. No, I can see that, yeah.
But come to my Twitter, Sophia. I have a lovely Twitter. There's no... It's
I'm just saying, like, my Twitter's
sure
a great experience because I mercilessly curate it.
Exactly. Just, anyone talks about politics, they get muted.
It's not that I spend time on Twitter. I just, I hear about things that happen on Twitter, and I'm like...
It is darker than, real... So one of the things that's funny about Ink Black Heart is why people aren't just muting and blocking each other the whole time.
True.
Yeah, so all of the sock puppet accounts should have been muted and blocked by everyone at the moment they first speak. So it is, it definitely... That's Twitter without any possibility of mute or block, it seems to me.
I mean, I feel like it's also Twitter as Gryffindors would use it, where they're like, we will fight, we will make our stand.
Whereas us Ravenpuffs, we're just like, no.
Yeah, we're just like,
talk like that,
no.
You get blocked. That's
not
the end
spending
of that.
time on it.
Oh, dear.
Well, very happy to have you both back here for our semi-annual Cormoran Strike crossover. So today, for episode number 49, we are gathered to discuss a crossover with Cormoran Strike, you may have guessed. But specifically, we want to discuss the main characters of Cormoran Strike and how they parallel the main characters of the Potter series. We've talked a lot on previous episodes about how the 2-book series are sort of running in parallel to each other, and we've done that for predictions, we've done that for characters, specifically the villains of Ink Black Heart, which I really loved that episode. So today we're going to talk about the heroes instead of the villains. We got around to them eventually. We all know villains are more fun. So, spoiler alert, we are going to be doing spoilers for the first 7 Cormoran Strike books. That is up through The Running Grave. So, you've been warned. Go forth, read the books, and I'm really excited for this one.
And if any of us can read the future, we'll just throw in there spoilers for the next few books as well. If any of us are claiming to be Professor Trelawney,
Yeah, I mean, that part in book 10 where, like, Robin walks into the forest and, like, meets up with the ghosts of Matthew and, Michael Ellicott. Like, oh, so emotional.
So emotional. And every other death that Irvin has predicted for the last
Yes, yeah, with Nick, with Ilsa, with Charlotte. Oh my god.
The nephews are still healthy and well, Irvin. I can say that way.
You know what? We have 3 books. We have 3 books left. I'm waiting for my bloodbath.
I've got a death to predict that no one's going to like, but we'll get to that later.
But okay, before we kick things off, we want to give a huge thank you to Caroline Oberlander over on our Patreon, who bought us this round of drinks at the pub. So yay! Thank you, Carolina. Currently my round of drinks is an enormous coffee. I need one. So it's very much appreciated. But listeners, if you'd like to buy us around at the pub, head on over to patreon.com/3broomsticks with the numeral 3 to sign up. We're offering bonus content, chats with the host, on-episode shoutouts, and all kinds of fun stuff. So we'd really appreciate your help in keeping the lights on at the 3 Broomsticks so we can talk about Harry Potter for a long time to come. Now we're gonna offer a toast to the comments on episode 46. This episode was our character discussion of Cornelius Fudge, and we had a lot of really, really great discussion all about, wizarding politics and his character and all that. But we also had some very important discussions about fudge. Like the tasty kind. So we raise our glass to commenter Absent-Minded Raven, who said on the topic of Fudge's house that, well, there are different types of fudge based on the house. So Gryffindor would be Russian fudge, Slytherin would be rum and raisin, Ravenclaw would be peppermint swirl, Hufflepuff would just be good old chocolate, and Malevolent fudge, which we discussed on the episode, would be cinnamon spice. And I thought this was excellent.
I love it.
Forget my ignorance, but what's Russian fudge?
I don't know either.
I think I looked it up, but I have not had the caffeine to recall right now.
I mean,
so,
the only thing
actually,
I can think of
Russian
that's
fudge?
Russian that would have the red of Gryffindor is beets, and I can't imagine beets and fudge. So
Maybe it's vodka.
You know what? I think it would be good.
vodka would be vodka.
Oh no,
would be
I did
good,
look this up. So Russian fudge, it's like a brownish fudge, so it's made with butter, golden syrup, and condensed milk.
Oh, okay. So it's not chocolate.
That sounds good.
Okay. All right.
It's
so
not
like,
chocolate.
Kind of like a treacle, maybe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Which is
All right.
Harry's favorite.
Well, that was
That
Harry's
is,
favorite.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel very weird about this because I really like the Gryffindor and the Hufflepuff fudge, which, like, I don't like Gryffindor things. This goes against my religion. maybe let's switch it.
Having
Maybe
a little crisis here.
yes. I Absent-Minded Raven gave me a whole crisis of faith in our comments. I'm gonna need a second to process all that.
All right, we good?
Okay. I'm gonna make my peace with that, and you know what? I think I'm just gonna have some fudge, and then that'll make it better.
That'll make it better.
Okay.
You're eating the Gryffindor, so I don't know. I'm trying to make a metaphor here, but I'm too tired.
Oh, I thought we were going for dirty jokes. I was like, which Gryffindor do you want to eat?
Yeah, okay. Which one do you want to eat, Irvin? Let's go there.
I mean, I wouldn't oppose Ginny Weasley. I'm just saying.
All right, so you're eating Ginny Weasley. All right, moving on.
There we go. As a Russian. Okay, but listeners, if you want to talk to us about fudge or characters or what have you, we'd love to hear from you in the comments on our website. And with that, let's get into the main discussion. Cormoran Strike characters as Harry Potter characters. I think we've mentioned this on previous episodes, right? That there isn't like a strict one-to-one parallel. It's not like, Strike is Harry, Ron is Hermione, like, and we all go home. They sort of take on different aspects of the characters as, like, the story dictates and all that. But sort of, I wanted to talk about sort of which character they're more overwhelmingly like, specifically in the way they relate to each other. So, for me, sort of the really obvious parallel is Strike as Ron Weasley and Robin as Hermione.
Yeah.
Because, right, like, they're both the main romances of the series, which, doesn't mean I have to be happy about it. We all know I'm anti-Strike Robin. But, like someone against Ron and Hermione going into Deathly Hallows, I know I'm on the losing side. Because, yeah, like, even though Harry's the protagonist, I think we can definitely say that Ron and Hermione are the main romance of the Potter series.
Yeah.
It is the slowest of slow burns. Ron and Hermione got there after 7 books. Strike and Robin are taking their sweet-ass time.
Yeah.
The other parallel is that the woman in the couple is obviously way too good for the man.
At least the balance is slightly improved, I think.
Yeah.
Oh, in Harry Potter? Yeah.
No, I mean...
in Strike
I mean Strike is more of a catch than Ron.
Oh.
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, I think so.
I think so. I agree with B on that.
I would say, personally, I think that Ron, with more time to mature, could be more of a catch than Strike, in my personal opinion, because I am not in the camp who finds Strike hot. I know a lot of people find Strike hot.
There are a lot of people in that camp, though, whereas I feel that there's not a lot of people in the Ron and Strike camp.
That's true. But yeah. So this is just coming from me, who does not find Strike attractive, but does not dislike him as a character anymore. I think originally I had some more misgivings.
Well, I think he's changed as well, So he's
changed.
Definitely
so I think,
grown.
Yeah. I think that what's nice about watching this Strike and Robin's romance versus Ron and Hermione's is that Strike has, like, consistently over time shown changes in the right direction, and he has like sort of put a lot of work into that. And we actually do see that with Ron in book 7. Like I despite the fact that he leaves the trio, like I do actually, other than that, really love Ron in book 7 because you see how hard he's trying with Hermione. And I think that if Ron, like what I like about watching Strike and Robin is that they're both adults, and so they are like putting more work into, like, I don't know, they're just more mature and putting more work into maturing. With Ron, it's like he's 17, like, yeah.
And he's stayed younger than that, hasn't he, in many ways. But I think there's an interesting thing. So in both cases, we're looking at a traditional literary trope of the quarrelling couple. So the Beatrice and Benedict in Much Ado is the sort of classic one, as are quite a lot of Jane Austen heroines. And that's very clear with Ron and Hermione. What I think is interesting with Strike and Robin is although they quarrel, and they quarrel very effectively, so that big argument in Troubled Blood really affects how they interrelate. They're not arguing about their romance anymore in quite the same way. So I think one of the things with Ron and Hermione is that was kind of what all the argument was about, was that Ron not seeing her as a woman. Have you thought about inviting me to the ball? I am a girl. It's not quite.
That was only one or two of their arguments. I feel like Ron and Hermione fight about so much more than their romance.
They do. No, they do. I agree, because obviously there's a huge book series, but I just feel that sort of, once they realise they're attracted to each other, that's the nub of quite a lot of the argument going on. And generally in the arguments, I mean, so think of different ones, but Ron is often just completely in the wrong.
Yes.
So he's just mean to her and she's upset or whatever. Whereas I think with Strike and Robin, there's usually some, each side has got a kernel of a point, even if
there are fine people on both sides.
Yeah.
I feel like I disagree with that statement in all contexts, including this one.
Yeah.
I find Strike to be usually largely in the wrong, especially in the Troubled Blood one.
Oh, yeah.
Like, I was cheering on Robin the way I cheered on Hermione in Deathly Hallows. I was like, you tell him, girl, you go, girl.
Yes, but he's in the wrong because he's completely drunk in that one. So he's not in the wrong about... So, I mean, that's a really interesting one, and particularly as we kind of know what the author thinks about the issue under discussion. Strike becomes wrong in that conversation because of its interaction with Robin, not because his argument is wrong. In the dinner party from hell.
Yes.
So I think he's definitely meant to be in the right in the argument, but he's just not, this isn't, you're not allowed to come in and just trash someone else's dinner party. You're not allowed to bring up things that mean that Robin is vulnerable in a way that you shouldn't have put her into that situation. So, but it doesn't make his arguments wrong.
But Robin never accuses his arguments of being wrong.
No,
so
that's right. But it's a slight cheat to make something that's a fight between them when actually they both kind of agree about the underlying stuff that's going on.
Well, what for me helps push Ron up in the boyfriend category here is that he is the one that comes with the great family. Both Harry and Hermione marry into the Weasley family. I mean, particularly for Harry, this is the family he's always wanted and needed. Harry and Jenny are much more about Harry becoming a Weasley than it is about Jenny becoming a Potter. Strike, of course, does not have the functional family. He doesn't really have, any sort of family other than Lucy. Well, now we got Prudence, so maybe we're getting there. But functional family and Strike do not go together. And I think that is important because we see this in the Robin and Matthew relationship. I mean, one very early marker that this relationship was not going to work out was how much Robin disliked his family and his family disliked her. And
did we ever find out why his family disliked her? I mean, Robin seems the least likely person for an in-laws to do.
Yeah.
Well, we heard it that there's that one line is that the way she left university had tainted her in Mrs. Cunliffe's eyes. I mean, Mrs. Cunliffe sounds like she blamed her for being raped.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty despicable
like a real
thing.
Piece of work, doesn't she? I forgot
and of course we had Auntie Sue at the wedding, who I think deserves to marry Indigo Epcot in terms of her obnoxiousness. But
a bit of an Aunt Muriel there. There are some Weasleys one doesn't wish to join.
yeah. So, but I do think, Robin doesn't particularly like his mother. She doesn't particularly like his sister. She doesn't like his father. She finds him, overbearing and.
Yeah. She doesn't especially like him.
Yeah. Whereas,
fair enough.
Both Hermione and Harry, just were kind of immediately part of the Weasley family right from the beginning, well before they married into it. So I think that is something that is important, and that's why I think Robin and Linda are going to have to come to some peace, and Linda, I think in particular, is really going to have to embrace Strike before that relationship proceeds. Because I think it's a bad sign if you go into a marriage or into a long-term relationship with the family actively disliking the person.
And I do think Linda is, Linda seems to me to have absolutely every right to be completely against Robin's job. As a mum, the idea of a job that is continuously leading to her being stabbed and put in boxes and stuff. But it's not Strike's fault. So she just has to separate that from, this is, I don't want you to do your job, but this is not, Strike is obviously not the problem.
Yeah. But one of the things where you see the dynamic between, Strike as Ron and Robin as Hermione is the woman in the couple, she has a lot of empathy for the downtrodden. I feel like we sort of see a lot of Hermione in Robin and vice versa, in the way Hermione campaigns for house elves, in the way Robin will, fight for, the abused children in Career of Evil.
I do think that's a really interesting connection, because in both cases, they're morally in the right, but the narrative is against them in some way. So there's a kind of sense of it. Everyone else is laughing at her about spew, and there is a question about, obviously things like trying to put clothes that are hidden from the house elves and things. There are questions about the way Hermione goes around it. And it's the same with Robin. She's obviously completely in the right to think, I must get this child abuser out of this house. But the fact is, doing so might simply lead to in the real world situation that could have destroyed a murder trial and just got him out of the house, and he goes to another house and starts abusing other children. So I think Strike's not wrong to complain about the way she did that as well. So it's changed from a sort of the childish version where it was just slightly mocking Hermione, but actually thinking, but she's morally in the right, to the more complicated real world situation of Career of Evil.
Yeah. But I think that's a really good parallel, because they both have a lot of empathy and fight for the underdog, but their journey is sort of learning to understand the nuances in that.
I suppose though I do think Ron isn't that bothered about these things. Hopefully he comes to it more, but he is from a position of not being that bothered. Whereas Strike is absolutely before, while Robin was still a child, Strike has been fighting for the underdog. In that, we know from his history with Brockbank and things. So it's almost like he was like Robin. When he punches Brockbank, he's like Robin. It is Brockbank.
And of course, it backfires dismally, of course.
Exactly. So he's been there. He's been the idealist who thinks you just stand up to these people and this has worked. And he's grown out of that. He's gone to a more adult position of that desire to enact my own righteousness has actually caused this problem. So he's more aware. So it's not like Ron, who is just coming from an unthinking position and finally realises that he ought to care about the house elves. It's much more complicated than that with Strike.
Mm-hmm. So they're coming at it from different histories, but I actually find there's a lot of commonality between Strike and Ron on this, because they both sort of can agree in theory, but they don't sort of have, the girls righteous zeal. And they both sort of learn to sort of back the girl up, and that she's kind of right. We sort of see...
I don't. So what about Silkworm then? So what about taking on the case for no money at the beginning of Silkworm. That's not when he's been influenced by Robin. That's Strike's natural rooting for the underdog.
So he naturally roots for the underdog, but I feel like sort of the incidental characters that he comes across, he's become much more gung-ho about saving them than I think he was. Because you compare his actions in Career of Evil to Ink Black Heart, where he's trying to save Iago Ross's kids. He's trying to save
Zoe.
God, what's the
Zoe.
girl? Zoe,
Tim
yeah.
Ashcroft.
Like, he really goes out of his way to save, you know, sort of all the victims he comes across in Ink Black Heart, as opposed to just focusing on, like, this one underdog that he has, like, taken up and championed. Which I think parallels nicely with Ron, like, you know, learning that house elves are worth something. Like, you know, he's inching in the right direction. So I actually think they're kind of on parallel journeys there.
Yeah, and I think, like, Ron, it's not that he doesn't think house elves are worth anything. Like, we see in Goblet of Fire, like, he loves Dobby. Like, you know, he and Dobby get along really well. But it's more the larger cause. Like, he definitely, like, is totally, you know, he wants to give Dobby, you know, his socks and his sweater, and he's like, but I think that, okay, and this is going to be controversial, but, and I wrote an article about this, that on MuggleNet called, Irvin might remember, house elves are not a metaphor
a metaphor for transatlantic slavery.
Yes, thank you. So I would argue, so what I say in that article, you know, is that house elves, that I believe within the universe, house elves are meant to be, you know, a version of brownies or, you know, other figures like that in folklore. And the idea of them is that they do like to work. They don't like being paid, but that, like, that is the sort of folklore around them, that they get insulted if they're being paid for things, and that what Rowling is doing with the series is looking at this folklore and saying, like, okay, so what if we have these creatures who love to work for humans, don't like being paid, but then the wizards, like, totally take advantage of this and treat them really cruelly and make them so they have no rights and, you know, all of these different things. And I think that Ron, having grown up in a wizard family, understands more of how house elves are fundamentally different from humans in their disposition. And Hermione is just looking at the structure of what's going on, which is totally wrong. So I think both of them have some right in this argument, and kind of need to be able to see each other's side a bit for this to have the full perspective on what's going on.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm completely persuaded by Catherine McDaniel's point in The Elfin Mystique that the house elves are a metaphor for the subjugation of women within marriage, and this idea that, you know, you feel that very strongly, I think, with Winky, that she thinks the house will sort of fall apart without her, and Hermione says, you know, other people can iron their own shirt and cook for themselves. And this idea of basically the sort of traditional feminine model as something that women have accepted in, you know, obviously in traditional ideas, and that it isn't actually good for them, but how you can't just sort of blow it up. You have to get people to decide they also don't want it for themselves. Well, they still want it for themselves. It doesn't work to try and just say, this is the patriarchy and it doesn't fit. So I don't think it's about slavery at all, so I'm completely with you there.
B, can you link to that? Because I would love to read that.
Yeah, it's in something called Past Watchful Dragons, which is a book in 2007.
Oh gosh.
So
I'm about to go on a quest to the library.
Yeah, that's right. So I'm afraid I think you can't get it on the internet. I think you'll need to get the book But yeah, I really think that deserves a wider awareness, and I think it does. I think it's really helpful in the current arguments people have had about, oh my goodness, Harry Potter accepts slavery, and you're like, no.
Yeah.
That's obviously...
I have to say, I think the two essays I reference the most, across all my, discussions in the fandom aren't mine, but I think are the House Elves one by Sophia and the Goblins one by Beatrice. I'm just like, guys, read these. But yeah, and to your point that, Hermione, while having the best of intentions, needs to learn nuance, we also see Robin sort of getting around to that where, in in Ink Black Heart, she's like, all right, so we did this, so, we got what we needed from the kids, and then Strike is like, yeah, and then we're gonna save the kids. And she's like, we are? So...
That's true, although that's because she doesn't believe he wanted to do that.
Yes.
So she's worried. That's not that she. That's absolutely what she would have done, but she's worried that he's not. So her surprise is at, I didn't know you were on board with this.
And it feels similar to the end of Deathly Hallows when Ron is like, we have to save the House Elves, and Hermione is so surprised and relieved and wow.
No, exactly. Yeah. She would always have done that herself. Yeah. It's not that she's learned from him to do it, but she's like, you're on board. Yeah.
Yes. But no kissing this time.
Yeah, no kissing.
No kissing. Although I would like to say that I'm happy with that now. Having, spent books and books going, where is this? I'm now thinking, it's going to be so good when it finally happens now that we've waited so long. I still want it to happen next book, but I think she has really achieved what she wanted with that slow burn.
And I should point out that he does, remember, Strike did kiss the top of of Robin's head when he rescued her. I mean,
and there's a miss kiss, isn't there, where they kiss by mistake on the side of the face. Yeah,
when you think about that rescue, he could have rescued Midge or Pat from a similar situation, and he might have been hugging them at the end, but he wouldn't have been kissing them on top of the head. So Robin got something there that the other ladies would not have. So we're moving in the right direction.
That's right. It's like them falling asleep holding hands in the bed. It's like, this is major. They've shared a bed. And you're like, but it's still quite small potatoes. But I do think that, and I know, I don't know, this is Irvin, you mentioning this, but I'd had the same exactly thought of this is the moment of the hand holding asleep in Grimmauld Place.
Yes.
Yes.
All right. Sweet.
Although that one's interesting, isn't it? Because we see that from Harry's perspective. Mm-hmm. So I feel like Ron and Hermione know much more what they're doing when they hold hands there. This is a sign that they are aware of their relationship. Whereas when Robin and Strike do, that's not going on,
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. It's a strictly comfort thing.
Yeah.
Well, that kiss on the top of the head is the one reason I wish maybe they had gone ahead and shaved her head, because think about how much more aware she would have been of that had her head been bald at the time. But because I don't think Robin was even registered it. But if she had been bald, she would have felt it.
On topic of what Beatrice was saying about how we get it from Harry's perspective, I was actually just listening to the Strike and Ellicott Files episode on this yesterday. I've gone through 4 episodes while I'm unpacking. It's great. So they mentioned that it's a fairly remote third-person narration when Strike and Robin are in bed together. We don't really get what Strike is thinking. We don't really get what Robin is thinking. It's kind of a more removed third person than we get throughout a lot of the series, where we know exactly every thought in their heads.
That's interesting. Yeah.
I think you're absolutely right there.
In a way, we're kind of getting it from Harry's perspective again, where we just see them holding hands.
A little bit. Yeah, that's right. But it's from the inside, but not. And I think Robin is so traumatized at that time that we couldn't really have an internal, she's not noticing things in a normal way. She's in a completely, trauma does often make you slightly turn into get yourself a third person view on things, doesn't it? People do that.
Yeah.
She's doing that a bit. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, though I think the point of view was Strike's in that scene.
Yeah, it was, yeah.
So sort of, it's like, it's right over Strike's shoulder, and then it zooms back out as they're in bed.
Yeah, and I think what Bea was saying about the fact that Ron and Hermione kind of know what they're doing with holding hands. Like, I think that kind of speaks to the fact that they don't have the same, like, external obstacles as Strike and Robin do, where, like, the main obstacle to them getting together in book 7 is the fact that they're, like, 17 and awkward and neither of them are actually gonna, like, say it, you know? Like, that's, like, the main obstacle is they're both like, yeah, we definitely both like each other, but, like, is anyone gonna make a move? And with Strike and Robin, it's more like, oh, the whole, like, you know, like, fate of our agency and our futures is weighing on this, and, like, do we actually want to take this risk, and does the other person feel the same way, etc.
So actually, like, what you said about Ron and Hermione, it reminds me, I was watching this really stupid Christmas Hallmark movie, a Christmas dance reunion or whatever. It had the stars from High School Musical, so obviously I was going to watch it. And so, like, you know, there's a spark and they're dancing together. And then at one point, like, you know, the woman starts crying her eyes out and her bestie is like, what's wrong? She's like, what if he doesn't like me back? And my friend and I just paused and we're like, really? Like, we're crying our eyes out over the possibility he doesn't like you back. Like, girl, don't you have real problems in your life? So, yeah, that's kind of where Ron and Hermione are at, where it's like, if they use their words, it would all be fine.
Yeah.
All right.
And arguably the same could be true for Strike and Robin, but they do have larger obstacles of, like, this could, if they mess up on this would be pretty catastrophic.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And she was married for a certain amount of time as well. So
Yes.
Yeah.
That too.
Yeah.
Too long.
Well, and Strike was engaged, which, you know, is also a thing. But also, like, talk of obstacles, like, there are a lot of, you know, rival love interests. And I feel like, especially in book 6, like, the romance subplot of book 6 with Ron and Hermione parallels Ink Black Heart so clearly. You know, you have Pez being Cormac McLaggen, you have Madeline being Lavender. I know we've, like, you know, talked briefly about these parallels before, but, like, I think just their journeys in book 6 match up so neatly, like, in terms of the romance, like, sort of big plot points we wanted to hit.
Mm-hmm. Oh yeah, I absolutely agree with you there. That's a wonderful parallel. Although, just to throw another, again, looking at this as not the one-to-one, but how different characters represent different facets of characters and events in Harry Potter. I think there were also major Cormac vibes from Saul Morris back in Troubled Blood, particularly with the Christmas connection, because, you know, Hermione asked Cormac to Slughorn's Christmas party to save face after Ron took up with Lavender. Robin starts drunk texting Morris on her Christmas holidays to save face after Matthew brings Sarah Shags-a-Lot home to Masham, sorry. And, you know, both of them really wind up regretting their choices because the guy takes it too far. Cormac gets handsy at the party, and then, of course, Morris sends that lovely photographic token of his affection. So I think, again, there's a facet of Cormac there, but then there's another chunk of him associated with Pez. Yeah. And there is, of course, no real Lav equivalent in Troubled Blood for Strike, because that's the one book where he is celibate.
The one book.
I do think that Bijou has strong Lav feelings because of all the embarrassing emojis. They just really fit with the embarrassing piece of jewelry. I think.
That is an insult to Lavender Brown, and I will not stand here for that kind of slander.
I would say that Bijou like Bijou and Lavender Brown, how she's portrayed in the movies. Yes, definitely. I mean, okay, I think Lavender Brown,
yes.
like, yes, she's a bit much, but she's also like 16 and in love, and like, you know.
No one's as bad as Bijou. But the fact it's just physical, so there's nothing going on with Ron and Lavender other than the kissing.
Yeah. No, I see that. You're right.
Bijou.
Yeah. I guess I always found Lavender in Madeline so clearly because of the jewelry connection. Because Madeline is a jeweler, and we have the, you know, My Sweetheart necklace, the iconic My Sweetheart necklace.
Yeah.
And of course, Bijou means jewel too. Bijou has that name meaning of jewel.
That's nice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh yes, that's true.
So.
Well,
I just think of her as bougie.
Yeah, I think what's interesting with Strike and Ron is that I think they just generally have a similar way at first of approaching relationships, which is just like, who is the most attractive person who will have me?
Is this available? Yeah. I'll go for it.
Yeah. and we see Ron say that very specifically, like with the Yule Ball, that Hermione's like, oh, so you'll just go with the most attractive person who will have you. And he's like, yeah, duh.
Yep, that sounds right. Yeah.
What were you expecting? Yeah.
Exactly. And we see...
Like, I don't understand the question.
Like, most of Strike's choices are just like, they don't have anything really in common with him. They're not like, they're just like, someone who's attractive, glitzy, whatever.
Well, he doesn't enjoy talking to any of them. I mean, that's
yeah. A classic one is Kiara, isn't it? The first one, that was definitely the sort of, you know, she's incredibly beautiful. But I don't know, you know, I just had this thing of, you know, she is a murder suspect, Strike.
Right! This bothers me so much. Sorry.
So much. You're like, you can't, she might be a supermodel, but you can't sleep with her while you don't know she didn't commit the murder.
So, I have a theory on that one. I think sleeping with Kiara was, like, one of the concessions Jo made to hide her identity. Because, like, oh, you know, like, private detective sleeps with a supermodel. It's very much like guy writing a private detective book.
That's so
fantasy
funny.
Yeah, I think it is what Jo Rowling thinks a male fantasy is.
That's hilarious. I love that.
Yeah, it's interesting. I did think it worked quite well. I don't know if any of you had this, but I had a very strong remembrance of that when he was thinking how good looking Abigail was in Running Grave, and I just thought, don't do it again, you know, this time. And I was kind of thinking, this is just gonna be another case where obviously this person isn't the murderer. You just mustn't sleep with them because they might be the murderer. But in some ways, it made me think Abigail was just another Kiara Porter, where I was being a bit over.
Wait, that was the clue. The fact that he didn't sleep with her means she was the murderer.
Exactly.
Okay. From now on, we know in book 8, whoever Strike doesn't sleep with is the murderer.
Well, he has.
We now have the pattern.
He has to fancy them as well. But it's if he fancies someone but doesn't sleep with her, you think this is very suspicious behavior.
Yeah, exactly.
And that's a great 1/7 parallel of like how Strike has changed over those years, that now he's really prioritizing the case over like
absolutely. And, you know, she does, you know, he has to make some of the running with Kiara, but with Abigail she's absolutely, well, you know, do you want to come back to mine? And it's like, no.
Yeah. And like Strike in book 1 also, the agency is in a very different place where it's just like, he doesn't expect to make the news for anything. He's just like, I can kind of like do what I want. Yeah, but you know, I think what's interesting, I think, okay, you know, I'm sure we all in our heart of hearts, like, believe that Hermione is beautiful, but like the way that she is, like, described in the books, or the way other people react to her most of the time, is more that she's like ordinary looking. And I think, you know, that's intentional. She's supposed to be ordinary, and all of them are supposed to be pretty ordinary looking. Whereas Robin is supposed to be very pretty. But I think that what Strike is attracted to her from the very beginning, but I think that she is kind of a different type of pretty than a lot of the people that he dates. And I think that a lot of the people he dates, it's like there's a certain level of like shallowness of like they are like their prettiness like almost is their personality, like in his mind almost. Like he doesn't really like they don't have that much underneath that he, at least not that he dives into.
Yeah. He would never have had the relationship with Charlotte if she hadn't been beautiful.
Right,
if Charlotte had been ugly, that would never have happened.
She's a nightmare. She's a nightmare. And
well, I mean, they're all involved in careers that have to do with good looks. You've got a model,
right?
You've got a TV presenter, you've got a clothing dealer, you've got a jewelry dealer. All of these careers they have. And then, well, of course, Bijou is a lawyer, but she dresses and acts like a complete, tart. And her main goal is to get pregnant by a rich guy. She's not a very good representative of a intellectual profession at that point.
Mm-hmm.
And I love the moment in Ink Black Heart after Strike has left Charlotte and goes to Robin, and he just like notices how different Robin is in like how she's just like straight out of the shower, kind of clean, wholesome, like that she's not, she's just like in her bathrobe, and there's this just like down to earth, wholesome, natural prettiness to her that is so different than all of the other people that he dates. And I think that really speaks to Strike changing in what he's looking for over time, that it's not just like someone who's all done up to go out, but someone who like is wholesome, down to earth at home. And yeah, I like that moment.
Yeah. So is this Strike Hermione parallel where, they're both not conventionally attractive and yet everyone wants to do them anyway?
Well, I don't think everybody wanted to do Hermione and Harry Potter. I
don't know. In Half-Blood Prince, she kind of has her pick of the boys of Hogwarts. Like, she's like, yeah, I went out with Cormac McLaggen, but I thought about Zachariah Smith. Like, once Hermione grows in her confidence, like, the boys don't seem to mind her looks at all.
The thing is, I think that, I don't know. I think that Robin is conventionally attractive. I think that's canon. She is conventionally attractive.
Yes.
Strike is not, but people seem to want to be with him anyway. And like, I think Ron, like, I think a big difference between Strike and Ron is, and also between Hermione and Robin, and some of this might just be their age, is that Ron and Hermione are both far more insecure than Strike and Robin. And I think Strike in particular is not insecure about his romantic or sexual relationships. Like he knows that people are attracted to him and want to be with him. Like he is worried that Robin might not be, but in general, he is like pretty secure in himself.
Yeah.
And
that's a sign that the Robin relationship is the real one, isn't
yes.
it? It's the only one where he has any insecurity.
Yes. And like, whereas with Ron, like, yes, part of him going after like Lavender and stuff is just that he can be a little bit shallow, but also I think part of it is just like, oh my God, someone wants to be with me. Like, it's just like he's so insecure that he's like grabs onto any opportunity. And like, I think with Hermione too, that like, I think we see some insecurity with Robin, like after she leaves Matthew and like with dating again and stuff. But like, I think that she knows that she's attractive. I don't think that's the thing. But I think that's interesting to look at their relationships through the lens of like insecurity about romance or about dating.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. We mustn't get too much because we've only just begun Ron and Hermione. But I don't know if Hermione's insecure. in that I feel, when we were talking about her asking out, Cormac McLaggen, I don't think that's saving face. I think that's revenge. I don't think she has any issues.
Oh yeah, definitely revenge.
Attractiveness or whatever. And she's quite aware, I want to revenge myself and Ron. I'll get this guy to, come out with me. So I feel like and of course, she has that major success at the Yule Ball. And she doesn't, she never thinks this guy's an internationally famous heartthrob. It's a bit surprising he's dating me. She doesn't seem to have any issues with that. So I'm not sure she is insecure. But that does fit, again, with Robin, who has insecurity about her ability to start dating. And she's, I'm the least... I didn't really spot this guy was trying to pick me up and all that, but she's not insecure about her worth or her attractiveness. I think just her sort of... she's just been a long time from the dating game and she's not really sure how to play it anymore, but that's a slightly different thing.
Sure. I think we don't have as much evidence, I think, but I think in both cases, like, I think Hermione is insecure about whether Ron finds her attractive.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So she's like Strike there, isn't she? So the insecurity is with the person you really want.
Yes.
But not a general insecurity.
Yeah.
I think it's just the fact that she doesn't care if Cormac finds her attractive.
Right.
She's like, hey, Cormac, like, want to go out? Like, if he says no, she's like, oh no, what a shame.
Zachariah
she doesn't
also,
care
I'm so
that
glad-
much about Crumb either, but she doesn't have any sort of...
Oh, I disagree with that. I think...
No, she enjoys being out with
care.
Crumb, but we don't see any sort of insecurity about that. Might Crumb be fighting
well,
no.
Well, that's because she didn't have time to get insecure. Because, like, he sort of, swooped in and was like, I like you. I've never met a girl quite like you. So, like, sort of before she could get in her head about it, like, he was already, telling her he's into her. I think if she'd had time to think about it.
Let's be real, like, Hermione doesn't think Crumb is attractive. Like, she specifically says, like, oh, he just, like, looks really grumpy, like, whatever, why do all the girls like him? Like, why do... So, like, I think that for Hermione, it's not like, oh, wow, this, like, really hot guy likes me. It's, like, this kind of ugly guy who just, like, everyone seems to like because he plays Quidditch likes me,
Yeah.
It's funny, Crumb's quite like Strike in that way, isn't he? That he's not obviously physically attractive, but everybody is swooning over him.
Yeah, definitely.
Yes, because he's very good at what he does.
Yeah.
Also, I'm so glad we're talking about Cormac McLaggen so much because I'm cosplaying him this weekend.
Yes!
So, like, this is getting me in the zone.
Head, yes.
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited for that one. I even got a sprig of mistletoe so I can chase people around.
Oh, God. Okay, we got to put a photo of that on our Instagram.
Yeah. But let's talk more about, like, the parallels of Strike as Ron and Hermione as Robin sort of, outside of, them as a couple. Because I feel like there are also, like, individual beats that you can really sort of see the characters being similar in. Like Robin as Hermione, just especially at the beginning of the series, they're both new to, like, the world we're entering. Robin is new to the world of private investigation in Cuckoo's Calling, like, completely new, Muggle-born, just like Hermione was new to wizarding. But through a lot of hard work, they both proved to, like, really be naturals at it.
Yeah.
Yeah, although to me that's much more Harry. So I definitely see Robin as entering into what she was always meant to be by going through this, portal of transformation into this new place as Harry doing it. Because we don't really see in Hermione, so Hermione is Muggle-born, but we don't get that same sense of wonder and desire from her as we do from Harry.
Yeah, it's a good point. That's interesting. I haven't thought about it that way, but...
But for Harry, is it desire to be, like, in the wizarding world, or is it just desire to not be at the Dursleys?
No, it's both. Obviously, he's leaving something horrible. which we could argue.
So is Robin.
Too. Yeah, exactly. The ghastliness of Matthew is the Dursleys, but he absolutely, when he enters Diagon Alley and wishes he had more eyes so he could look around him. That's not just about what he's left. It's
fair enough.
Deep excitement.
Yeah, I think some Robin parallels though is how instantly good at everything Robin is, and also I'd say some of Robin's, even though she's really good at stuff, she still has, going back to insecurity, I think that she is really a perfectionist in that she wants to be, great at everything immediately and wants Strike to appreciate everything she does and wants, I think that there's this, anxiety about not being seen as good enough. And I think that is something that Hermione has as well. Hermione, I'd say, has it more intensely, but...
Yeah, they both thrive on praise, don't they? They both really care about that. Yeah.
Yes, definitely.
Well, I debated through the first 3 books whether I thought Robin was a Gryffindor or a Ravenclaw. And so, I think she's like Hermione in that she really could go either way in terms of both that incredible bravery and that incredible intelligence. I finally decided in Lethal White that Robin must be a Ravenclaw, because when she's walking out on Matthew and she throws the fact that she made higher exam scores, was it the O levels? Or A levels. I don't remember which one it is, but anyway, she got into her first choice university, and I really think that's only a Ravenclaw would do that when you're walking out on your cheating, abusive boyfriend, is to throw the fact that you scored higher on the exams than they did. And of course, we can't forget also in the very first case, Robin sort of first foray into independent investigation is when she runs off to the library. To the university library to get those answers about Luna Landry's dad. So you've got that when in doubt, go to the library aspect of Hermione too.
Yeah.
Well, and we see this in some of the things that happen to them, them getting tortured in book 7
Yes.
Was sort of a very clear parallel
absolutely.
Between Robin and Hermione.
Yeah.
And sort of, and also how they both hold up to it.
Yes.
Is incredible.
And lie under I don't know, that they continue to, because they're both sort of undercover in that moment, or they're both sort of have a lie that they're trying to tell even.
And you don't think about this often, but they both have to go back in a fairly quick succession and actually confront their torturers. I mean, Hermione, she's tortured by Bellatrix, and then, within a few weeks, she has to pretend to be Bellatrix. I mean, she has to take on Bellatrix's body, which is pretty strong exposure for something that you're probably a bit PTSD about. And same with Robin. She has to go back at the end and confront Mazu and face her down after that torture. And that's a pretty powerful indicator of both their braveries.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you guys think of any other Robin Hermione parallels throughout the series? Because y'all know the earlier books especially better than I do.
I think there's the obvious Yule Ball kind of Robin in the green dress, and there's that at the end she sees Strike with Charlotte and she feels kind of rejected or scared about what that means. And it's not exactly the same as Ron and Hermione arguing at the Yule Ball, but there's that same feeling of romantic rejection at that Yule Ball.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. And then Strike as Ron. The first thing that came to my mind is they just have a million siblings.
Yeah. But of course, it's in some ways that's the complete opposite. Ron has, relationships, close relationships, grew up with all these siblings, whereas Strike did not. He only grew up with Lucy. So you've got a connection, but then you've got a contrast too. That kind of mirroring with both the reflection and the inversion.
Mm-hmm.
The main connection I find is just the humour. Both Strike and Ron are the funniest characters in their books, I think.
And love of food.
Yeah, love of food.
Yeah, definitely the love of food.
And that is part of the humour, isn't it? It's always a nice, a nice aspect. Yeah,
we're just lucky that Strike wasn't under the starvation diet in book 7, because we know what happened to Ron under that. Robin could handle it, but
actually, doesn't Ron give Hermione perfume at some point in either book 5 or book 6?
Yes. Oh, we just talked about this. Sorry, we will just talk about this on the next episode. I mean, because
stay tuned.
But in book 5, Troubled Blood, Order of the Phoenix, Ron gives perfume to Hermione, and not quite as much is made of it as Strike giving Robin perfume in book 5, but definitely a parallel.
But I would say that I think the perfume parallel, so that's obviously a brilliant link, but the perfume parallel is much more Ginny. So that the smell of Ginny, that smell of flowers that he realises means he loves her, and that way in which he misses Robin's perfume when it changes, and he misses the smell of her around the office. So in both those cases, sort of deep thing being done, that idea of the olfactory attraction of the person you're in love with, is a Ginny link, not a not a Ron link.
Yeah. I think the link is more that Strike is bad at buying perfume for Robin, and so is Ron.
But he gets it right in the end.
He does,
Strike,
because she picks it for herself.
Let her pick
he
it up
realizes
herself.
he needs her to pick it for himself. Yeah, but it's a perfect present in the end.
Yeah. Also, for the humor, how much of it is like Strike being like funny out loud the way Ron is, and how much of it is just a very sassy inner monologue the way Harry has?
Yes, that's true, although I don't think Harry's is quite as funny as Strike's, but I might be wrong.
Oh, I disagree.
It's pretty funny.
Harry cracks me up. Yeah.
But Strike does make a lot of out loud jokes as well.
Yeah.
I think.
Yeah. Can we talk? I've been doing it for years, that sort of stuff. It's a mixture. Yeah, it's a mixture, because obviously we've got that Strike as obviously the Harry protagonist.
Yeah, of course, we see Strike's internal dialogue so much more often than we see Ron's, so it's kind of hard to compare.
That is hard to compare.
We don't ever see Ron's, do we?
Yeah. No, not really. And so, but when we have, Strike envisioning some corrective procedures from which he thought Matthew might benefit and things like that, you have that kind of window into his mind. And of course, Robin does great internal jokes as well, or funny lines, like when Saul Morris asks her, well, what would it take to make you walk out on a blind date? And she says, you turning up.
Yeah, great one. If only she'd said it out loud.
Yeah.
And that type of stuff. So there's a lot of that internal humor, I think, on both sides.
Yeah, and of course it really works. The internal humor works brilliantly from the writer's point of view, because it's not cruel. You know, you can have these thoughts and they make the reader laugh. But sometimes, and I love it when Luna says, Ron's funny, but he can be unkind. Because no one else...
That really is strong so good, Strike energy.
Yeah, because no one else really makes that, calls him out on it in the same way. And so making these internal monologues, because he's not unkind. So it's a very clever way of doing that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And sort of, I think for both Strike and Ron, they sort of have to learn tact over time, and have to learn which times do you say things out loud and which times do you keep it in.
So of course, one of the first Strike jokes is one that he keeps internally when John Bristow says that he lost his brother when he was younger, and Strike thinks, what, another one? losing one sibling is unfortunate, two is carelessness. And he's like, that joke is about, that's the murder. That joke is misdirection for the reader. But yeah, he tactfully doesn't say it out loud. Maybe if it had, it would have been better.
And I feel like young Ron probably would. And like, honestly, probably young Strike too. Like, I feel like if we saw like a young Strike and a young Robin, like, I think that Strike would be just as like incapable of tact as a young Ron, perhaps even more so.
Yeah. I'd agree with that.
You know, who has that sort of tactless blurting out stuff is Dave Polworth. You can see that kind of aspect of Ron in Dave Polworth.
There's a Ron aspect of Dave Polworth of the great mate who can say things that are a bit off. The great mate who perhaps other people are not quite sure why you're such a mate with. But Dave Polworth also, you know, when he comes good in getting them to see Joan. That's an example of again a Ron like, you know, deeply loyal, which is nice. And I think there's a fundamental difference between Strike and Ron in their childhoods. So you have Ron, who just has this incredibly happy, simple, straightforward childhood, which we're told Robin had as well. Whereas Strike has this very complex one where he is, you know, from a very young age feeling he has to protect his mother and Lucy and all that he's actually grown up very quickly as a result of that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think Robin's childhood is sort of the most clear parallel to Ron's. Yeah. Because she seems to grow up, like, you know, somewhere rural with a lot of siblings. Like, it's strong Weasley vibes.
Right. Yeah. And, like, both Ron and Strike are, like, described as not growing up with much money. But it's so different for Ron and Strike. Like, because for Ron, it especially since this is the wizarding world, where it's like, you know, you can make more food if you, like, you can, like, if you have food, you can make more of it.
You can go hungry.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So it's like, he has had, you know, a comfortable, solid, you know, enjoyable life, childhood. He just doesn't have as much money as his friends do. But for Strike, it was like complete chaos and fear. And you can see how different it is having a solid family and also, you know, being a wizard and the real world and having that broken family.
And that's much more like Harry's, isn't it? Of where he grows up deep privation, which he doesn't need to have. And Strike's the same. Mm-hmm. You know, if his mother had just been a bit more reasonable and saved the money and things, he could have had a perfectly
comfortable.
Yeah. A comfortable childhood.
Just lived with Joan, and Ted, you know.
But it was a normal childhood was in his reach, but he's kept away from it, and there's something similar with Harry.
Yeah, that's a great point. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think that's a way to transition us to Strike as Harry rather than Ron, because as the titular protagonists of the series, there are a lot of commonalities. You know, like you mentioned, you know, raised away from your parents, you know, lots of money sitting in a vault for you, raised by an aunt and uncle, but, you know, rather different ones.
Yes, absolutely.
Yes, quite different.
Yeah. And that idea, you know, particularly in the first book, we saw him going around and constantly meeting people like Gisume and Kiara and people like that who knew his father in a way that he didn't. Yeah. And
so like everybody looking at
you look just like him, but you have you know, your mother's eyes.
Yeah. And also the scar, you know, he doesn't like people keep on looking at his scar. With Harry and it's the same. Don't keep mentioning Rokeby.
Yeah, I was just rereading, I guess it was, I can't remember if it was Silkworm, where he actually draws a comparison with one of his childhood schoolmates who had like this red port mark on her forehead about how, and he said, you know, he felt commonality with her because they both had something that made them appear different to everyone else that they couldn't see. And
that's almost a meta reference, isn't
it?
Yeah. So you had this girl with this mark on her forehead, and then you had Strike comparing that to his, experience growing up as Rokby's son and realizing how famous his father was and how people were only interested in him because of who his father was.
And I do think it's really interesting in the way in which Rowling has responded to fame. With the first, with Harry Potter, the first book says, everyone's in the wizarding world's going to know your name, and this day is going to be the day when Harry Potter overcame. And, that came true in a way which she could never have imagined it was going to come true when she wrote it. No. Whereas Strike is a meditation on fame from a position of being, obviously incredibly famous and choosing a pseudonym because she's so famous, trying to get away from that. But the meditation on fame is much more heartfelt, I think. In Strike, I think his desire to get away from it is much stronger.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, because Strike is written entirely with, the hindsight of being famous.
Exactly. It's something she's trying to escape there, and which, it's not in the same way in Harry Potter. It might be something, you'd rather like it if loads of people bought your book and you became famous.
Yeah.
You just didn't know it was going to come true to the extent that it did.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting for both Harry and Strike is that they start out their life with some level of fame, but then they sort of make their own name. And their own actions then increase their fame. Like Harry, when he starts out at Hogwarts, he is already famous, but then over the next few years, he just becomes increasingly famous because he keeps on doing these spectacular things. And same with Strike, is that his fame just keeps on growing because of his accomplishments.
Yeah. But also if you look at it from their perspectives, their motivation, they both start out with a level of fame because of what happened to their parents.
True.
Not because of who they are.
Well, I'm not sure that's quite true with Harry, is it? It's the fact that the Voldemort tried to kill him and was destroyed.
I mean, yes, fair enough. Okay, so a certain fame due to something they did.
No, exactly. That's what you're conscious of, yeah.
Yeah, due to family circumstances, if you would. Like Voldemort attacking your family.
Yeah. Well, and of course, that is because of something Lily did. So we don't know that at the time, but it is something his mum did that made him famous, and it is something his dad did that made him famous.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so the series starts out, both series, with them really eager to make a name for themselves. We see this from Harry and Sorcerer's Stone, and not so much after that, but when he joins the Quidditch team, he's he really wants to prove himself, prove that he's worth something, that it's not just what happened to him as a baby. And then, when he finally catches that, she's like, no one could say he's just a famous name anymore. Now he's, done it all. Now he's a Quidditch star. And then he seems to sort of, have gotten that out of his system. And, after Sorcerer's Stone, when it's, 60 points to Harry Potter for going on an adventure, Harry's like, okay, good. Fame achieved. Check.
Yeah, and it does happen with Strike, doesn't it? So it's Cuckoo's Calling is where he sort of... It ends with him saying, I am become a name. That I made my own name now.
Yeah.
And while he doesn't like people mentioning Rokeby, I think he is a bit less sensitive about it from then on.
Right.
Well, for Strike, it's an ongoing quest for, I think, fame, because that gives legitimacy to his agency. He needs to, achieve a certain level of fame just to, keep the lights on.
He actively doesn't want fame. He doesn't want anyone to know his face. So he just wants fame for his agency.
Yeah, for his name. Yeah.
Exactly. His name, not his face, yeah.
Yeah, so I think that's a good Cuckoo's Calling, Sorcerer's Stone parallel, is that both of them need to achieve, they need to show that they can achieve things on their own. And both of them do after that first book, which gets them more attention. But then I think after that point, it starts to get oh, this is too much attention. Okay, I that's enough.
So, well, the word magic, I counted actually. It appears 4 times in Cuckoo's Calling. And once is in reference to Matthew's proposal and how Robin feels about it. But the other 3 times, it references something associated with ultra wealth, ultra privilege, ultra fame type stuff. It's you have Lula getting stuff for Rochelle with the magic credit cards. the doors to the Uzi, that exclusive club, magically open up to admit Strike and Kiara. And then you have this expensive, really, really expensive green dress that magically transforms Robin's figure into this serpentine goddess, whatever. So if you think of this world of the super rich and super famous as the equivalent to the magical world of Harry Potter, you can see how Strike is caught between the two, much as Harry is. You know, Harry should have grown up in that world as Rokby's son, but as you mentioned before, the circumstances of his childhood, kept him out of that. So I think I think there's that magic, and of course it's interesting, of course, in light of Rowling's own history, how magic becomes this position of incredible wealth and incredible fame.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And when Strike goes into those worlds, he's more likely to meet people who knew his father. So that's similar to Harry, who goes into the magical world and suddenly meets all these people who knew his parents. But for him, that's a positive thing because he never knew them. And for Strike, that's a negative thing because he never knew Rokeby, and Rokeby's still alive.
Yeah.
For now.
Well, I mean, that's a potential parallel question mark. I don't know if it's going to happen, but a quest to find out what happened to your parents, to sort of avenge them in a way. Harry's mommy and daddy issues are sort of front and center throughout the Potter series. And it's very much why did Voldemort attack them? Keep that conflict going. For Strike, we sort of, he has lots of mommy and daddy issues, bucket loads. But we haven't really seen him grappling with them yet,
Well, I think we'd had a little bit in Running Grave. So when he says to Lucy, she wasn't fit to be a mother, and Lucy's like, God, I've needed to hear you say that. That is quite like Harry realizing that James was a bully, and it's not Snape's right about that relationship. So I think we've had a little moment with that. We obviously haven't had it with Rokeby at all yet.
Oh my God, is Lucy the Snape?
No, Lucy's not a Snape.
That doesn't make Lucy the Snape, I don't think. That would be a surprise. Yeah, well, I was worried, I have to admit, when Lucy said, I didn't want her to die in that conversation. I had a sort of, Lucy did something that killed
But
Lena.
I have a question. At any point of the series, does Lucy ever say, look at me?
No.
Mm-hmm.
We're there.
You
But yeah,
have your
I think
mother's
Lucy
eyes.
could have been involved in the death there. But yeah, we shall see.
Yeah. I feel like every episode we've had about Strike, we're like, the next book, surely we figure out who killed Lita Strike.
Rokeby. Well, okay, so we're back here with the Rokeby next book. So yet again, but this time I really do think we're going to see Rokeby next book because
this time
because of the DNA emoji that she's used. Mm-hmm. So we know DNA is turning up. One assumes it's turning up in the case, and that the hallmark man, that hallmarking is a form of, that's the way you identify where gold and silver come from. So DNA are the human versions of hallmarking. So we're going to get some kind of DNA aspect with the case, but that's got to then tie in surely with Strike's own paternity and the DNA in his own life. So yeah, I'm yet again thinking this is going to be the one where we find out more about Rokeby.
Mm-hmm. This time for sure.
Yeah, exactly.
I feel like when the series is done, we're just going to need a supercut of our Strike episodes being well, next book we're going to find about Rokeby. Next week we'll know who killed Lita.
We should definitely have one of those. No, Lita...
And they're going to kiss.
Who killed Lita isn't going to happen till the final book. So when I thought 7 was going to be the final book, I thought it would be 7. But now we know there's 10. It's going to be 10. That's going to be the final thing. So that's fine. But yeah, Rokeby turning
Unless
up.
book 10 is about who killed Charlotte. Dun, 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 dun!
I was talking with Nick the other day, and I didn't quite get him to agree that Charlotte wasn't murdered, but I think it got pretty close.
Oh, good. Good.
No,
Thank you. Thank you.
See, I really want to get Nick on this show. Like the next Strike episode we're hoping to do is going to be about whether or not Charlotte was murdered.
Oh,
yeah.
Like I want to do a whole deep dive into this.
No, she wasn't murdered. That's
Because
the end of
the
that.
answer
It's a really, really short
is yes.
episode.
No, yeah, she was not murdered. She was killed. She killed herself.
And the shortest ever, 3 broomsticks.
Yeah, that really would be the shortest ever by a long shot.
To Charlotte, suicide victim. Cheers.
Just watch us. You think we can't do 3 hours on Charlotte being murdered? Just you wait.
She was murdered, but by herself.
Nay, it was
that's the twist.
foul play. But okay, so now that we've established Lucy as Snape, back to Strike as Harry. They both have like a very strong sense of justice throughout the text.
Yeah.
They both are very eager to like, make right. That said, as protagonists, I find Strike to be much more flawed than Harry is.
I think that's fair, because, I mean, Harry is, basically perfect, isn't he? There's very little times. He has moments, but on the whole, he's goodness personified. And Strike isn't like that. He has wonderful characteristics, but he is very flawed.
Yeah.
My particular beef with him recently was the whole, just because Ilsa tells me not to sleep with someone, that means I'm going to.
Yes.
You're like, Strike!
Yeah. I mean, he's so flawed that I just completely ran out of patience with him in Running Grave.
I think you're too hard on him, but yeah, there's no question that he's not quite Harry-like.
Well, I think that what's interesting is that the Harry Potter series, like, the point of it, like, if you think about the whole arc of the series, like, there isn't, it's not that Harry doesn't have character development, because he does, but it's not like the same way as with Strike of, like, there's a very specific character improvement arc that she's putting him through. And I don't think the same is true with Harry of, like, he needs to improve in X, Y, and Z ways, and this is how this series is bringing him to that point. I think it's a lot more like he is growing and maturing as a human being and therefore changes in different ways, but, like, also stays his core true, like, self, I
think that's absolutely right. And it's also things where he is wrong. So there's some really nice examples at the beginning and ends of the novel. And I think this happens most clearly in 2, where he starts 2 as a prisoner imprisoned in the room, and he ends it freeing, he's a liberator, he frees Ginny from her imprisonment. In 3, he starts furious Aunt Marge. So Aunt Marge's abuse of his mother is he can't cope with it, he blows her up, and he ends actually allowing the person who's guilty of her murder to go, not to be killed. And in 7, he starts really doubting Dumbledore and ends with real faith in him. So those are all improvements and movements, but they're not from a bad position. The initial position is perfectly justified. It's just that he goes above and beyond what you could expect of someone by the end. Right.
It's like, it's him maturing and growing, and it's sort of in a way that many adults have not reached that point. Yeah,
it's real being the hero. He's able to do things that other people are not able to do.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. He reaches certain ideals. Yeah.
Yeah. But what are some other Strike Harry parallels that come to mind?
Let's see. I mean, you got the orphan aspect. You've got the big pile. I think we mentioned the vault full of family gold that's in the bank. That Harry actually cares remarkably little about his wealth. He wants enough to buy candy on the Hogwarts Express, but he doesn't care about having the most stylish dress robes or anything like that. And he mentions a couple of times he'd just as soon give it to the Weasleys if they would take it. so Strike's got this gold that this huge pile of money in the bank that he, will not take or doesn't seem to want. There's that aspect of it.
I think there's also a bit of the, I have to be the one to handle all the danger. Like, no one else can handle all the danger like I do.
Yeah.
And we sort of see Harry letting Ron and Hermione in sort of as equals in their friendship. And we see sort of Strike with Robin, where, she's finally elevated, and then they're true partners, and she's the one who goes into the cult. Yeah.
Yeah, that's true. Although Robin, of course, doesn't give Strike much option with things like jumping in front of the train. That never.
Well, yes.
Yeah, that never happens to Harry. You never get the others sort of putting themselves in danger in a way which he's sort of powerless to save them from in that way.
Well, the others both defer to Harry a lot. I
think there aren't many ways in which Strike as Harry and Robin as Hermione, in terms of their dynamic that works. But I think sort of the one way is the way we see Robin defer to him, especially in the earlier books, because throughout the Potter series, we generally see Hermione defer to Harry, as the leader of their mission. We see it in Deathly Hallows when they're camping and Hermione's okay, what are we doing? And we see it sort of whenever they're in action, Harry's very clearly the leader. So yeah,
I think that's definitely generally true. There is a nice point in the camping though, where he's trying to persuade her to go to Godric's Hollow, isn't there? Where it's Hermione who's in charge, and it's only when Hermione says, "Yes, I think we do need to go to Godric's Hollow," that they go. So that's quite nice.
Yes.
Yeah. Well, of course, but both Harry and Strike are very good about acknowledging that they could never do what they need to do without Hermione and without Robin. Strike says a number of times, this agency wouldn't be where it is without you. You've done things that I could never do. He's very open about how much he relies on her. And I think Harry does that very much with Hermione as well.
We could have the sort of the link with the going into the cult is like Hermione having the extendable charmed bag, isn't it? Where, the boys would be completely lost from the very beginning of Deathly Hallows, we haven't got any stuff, we can't do anything. And she's got it all. And and Running Grave is the one where that happens with Robin. Robin completely takes charge of the investigation, does something no one else could do.
Yeah. And I think that speaks to the fact that both Harry and Hermione have different skill sets, and that I think that Hermione lets Harry lead because she recognizes a skill set that he has that she doesn't have as much, and that he recognizes her skill set. And I think we see that with Strike and Robin, because it's not so much that one of them is leading, but they do have distinct skill sets, and that over time they sort of figure out more and more okay, this is a Robin job because Robin is great at undercover work. I'm not so great at that, but I am good at, these skills. So they sort of divvy up the work based off of who has what skills.
Mm-hmm. So we've been talking about Robin as Hermione pretty much the whole time because, well, there's really only one female co-protagonist in the Potter series. But I was wondering if we could make any case for Robin as Ginny, or even for Strike as Harry, Robin as Ginny.
I've always thought Robin was a good mixture of Hermione and Ginny, actually, in terms of, Robin growing up with all the brothers, the only girl in the family of brothers. Yep. Brothers give her a hard time. She has to prove herself as a result. The physicality of Robin, that, Jenny was a great flyer, a Quidditch player, just like Robin's the great driver of cars. Mm-hmm. Hermione, was hopeless on a broomstick. She was not the physical heroine that she was the mental heroine, but not so much. I mean, yes, she could cast good spells, but you don't have to be physically strong to cast good spells. Jenny, I think, was in some ways better at physical defense, like the bat bogey hex that that takes down the Inquisitorial Squad. I think Jenny's the more likely than Hermione to jump onto a subway track to save someone. You've got that. You've got that physical aspect of Jenny that is there in Robin that Hermione is really lacking.
Yeah, I completely agree.
And of course, it's going to take them till the last couple of books to get together, just like it took, Harry till the very end of book 6 to get together with Jenny. They're together a short time. Then they're separated again because the mission is too important that they can't be together right now. And, they're only going to get together at the epilogue. And I think we may see that with Strike and Robin too.
Let's hope, Louise, that we don't get them together and then they break up because the agency can't cope. That would be... Yeah,
I was going to say,
I don't know. Yeah.
I don't think Harry and Ginny is a good parallel for the romance at all because, there wasn't the slow burn. Yeah, Harry realized Ginny's a girl and then, 10 pages later, Ginny kisses him and they're like, okay, great, and now we're together.
Yeah, there's a slow burn from Ginny's perspective, isn't it? Because she's into him from the very first moment she sees him.
That's true.
Which we definitely don't have here. It's not like Robin's been pining for him, since book 2.
No, that's right. It's almost more the other way. But
yeah, that's true. Strike is into her, can't have her, dates around. Oh my God, Strike is the Ginny.
Strike is Ginny.
There we are. We got it. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, the other aspect of Jenny I see in Robin is kind of that boldness, particularly when Robin's in her role-playing mode. I mean, Hermione could not act to save her life.
She's terrible at acting.
That's true.
When she tried to find out what Draco was buying in Borgin and Burke's, and so she goes in and says, "Hi, I'm his girlfriend. I'd like to know what he was buying, and would you please tell me?" And he's like, "Get out." And she nearly blew her cover when she's playing Bellatrix because she's too nice. I don't know how Jenny was as an actress, but definitely her gutsiness, her brashness would definitely have made it better than her and Hermione. If I had to send someone in undercover, I think I'd send Jenny rather than Hermione.
So there actually is a through line that Ginny is pretty good at mimicking people. I think there's one point in Order of the Phoenix where she, imitates Umbridge's cough and people, look around in alarm.
Yeah.
Oh,
so I think it's actually implied that Ginny is a good performer.
And that bit where she says there's garroting gas and you've got to go the other way, that's the kind of... sort of slightly undercover unit lying in a way that people believe.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah, the performative aspect, that's definitely Ginny. But so that's Strike and Robin. So have we done every permutation of Harry, Ron, Hermione, or Ginny, or are there any more we can hit up?
I'm very pleased with Strike as Ginny. I think that's...
I quite like that.
Now, there's some Strike as Hermione stuff, too. We've got that on our list.
Well, we've discussed in terms of their appearance, but what else you got?
Well, I think Strike stealing those books and learning Latin to spite the condescending professor in the squat, that's a very Hermione-ish thing to do. And his tendency
is it? I feel like Hermione's likelier to just...
Hey, Hermione steals all those books from Dumbledore's office. I mean, she just says Accio books, and then they come to her.
But if Hermione wanted to take down a professor, she just, have her carried off by centaurs. That's much more Hermione's style.
Yeah. But he does value his intellect, I think. I mean, I think there was a certain...
Yes.
He was proud of getting into Oxford and being able to be... despite the deprivations of his childhood, to be able to perform academically on the level of these rich public school kids. That's I think, important. And I think that was important for Hermione as she enters the wizarding world, that she really, really be at the top of her class, which is why she's always, hitting the books and everything.
Yeah.
Another Strike Hermione parallel to me was the moment when Strike kind of uses after he realizes that Little John betrayed them, he kind of uses him to see if he can get any more information, and then takes so much pleasure out of firing him and taking revenge. And to me, Hermione loves her revenge. Like, you know, it just like it really speaks of Marietta Edgecombe. Like, you know, it's just I think there is a little bit of that, like.
Yeah, and that's so odd, isn't it? Because that doesn't work. The Marietta Edgecombe doesn't work unless you tell people it's going to happen.
Right.
The whole point of that was to stop people betraying you. But if you don't tell them...
No. No, the point was not to stop people betraying you. The point was to punish them if they did.
But that's
completely
pointless.
different goals.
That's pointless. You
That is not pointless. It feels very good.
Once you sign it, you then say to everyone, and now if you betray me, you're going to have a really hideous disfigurement for the rest of your life. And they go, oh.
But that's not exactly
no, because
the best
that creates an atmosphere of fear and mistrust. Like, I think Hermione was right not to tell them.
No, it's completely pointless.
It is not pointless. Listen, if you've ever disfigured someone who betrayed you, it would feel very good.
I totally agree. That's a Hermione Strike.
Yeah, because to me,
that this sort of pointless revenge.
Both of those make me feel sad. Both Marietta and Little John, I just like felt sad. Like I did not enjoy that revenge.
Really?
No, it is too much. And as I say, it was really pointful to put something in to stop the betrayal. But once it's occurred, it seems to me, yeah.
Well, I found Little John to be more like Rita Skeeter, where like once his secret's uncovered, then Strike Hermione are just like, oh, now you're useful to me, so let's keep this going.
Keep you in the jar, yeah.
Yeah.
But he just doesn't do it very long for Little John. But yeah, that's a good link.
But with Rita Skeeter, it is more like they are openly enemies, but Hermione is using Rita Skeeter. Whereas with Little John, it's more like, yeah, maybe I'll let you keep your job. And then it's like, oh no, I was just using you. Like, I don't know. It's more manipulative. It's not
true.
as...
Although
yeah.
it is a bit more manipulative, but they still should be open enemies because he knows Little John is... You know, Little John knows that he's betrayed him, so...
Right, yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, Little John is not as with it as Rita Skeeter.
That's a really good parallel. I like Strike as the vengeful Hermione.
Yeah.
And you know, Artemis is incredibly vengeful. So the whole
that's
Actian
cool. Yeah.
story of just, you happen to see me bathing and therefore I'm going to turn you into a stag that your hounds will tear to pieces. So that's quite good.
Which I always found a great James Sirius parallel.
Wait, what?
As in, James is a stag, and in the myth, the dogs like tear him to pieces. So that, I mean, obviously, it's not really what happened to Sirius and James, but what everyone believes happened is that Sirius betrayed James.
All right,
okay.
so they think the Actian myth happened. Okay. But it's definitely the case that Rowling's been working with, obviously stag myths for a long time now, so she'll definitely know that. So when she gives Robin the name of Artemis in Running Grave, there's a definite, Wace should be very careful what he's playing with.
Yeah. But have we ever seen that side of Robin? Like, I'm trying to think. Like, Robin doesn't seem quite as
I don't think she is.
Strike.
But obviously, she wants the church entirely destroyed. And in that case, there's no vengeance there. This is absolutely
who wouldn't?
deserved.
Yes.
But yeah, she will destroy it.
Do we have any connections between Robin and Harry? Because like the one that comes to mind is less about their character and more about their role in the story. I feel like Robin and Harry are our two audience surrogates. Like, sort of, we see this new world of private investigation and magic, like, through their eyes.
Yeah, absolutely. And what's exciting about it, isn't it? That sense of, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Let's say, I mean, you mentioned the drowning, the near drowning in book 7. That's
yes.
In terms of something that happens to them. They both get pulled underwater and nearly drowned. And the language in those two scenes, there's just is incredibly similar. You've got these run-on sentences that convey that sense of drowning and suffocation, and then blacking out, and then they wake up and and in various different circumstances then. But the other thing I saw when Robin was in the attic in the wastes caring for Jacob, and you had that physical description of Jacob that was so similar to the Voldemort soul baby that Harry encountered in King's Cross Station in the afterlife, and of course that the soul baby, as Dumbledore says, is beyond help. We know of course that Jacob is at that point beyond help as well. Both Harry and Robin have come through a type of figurative death. I mean, Robin's emotional will was completely broken in that box, and she comes out of that box, completely submissive to the cult in terms, saying, compliance was the only answer.
Mm-hmm.
And, when she's in the attic with caring for Jacob, that compassion she has for him, and that information that she gets from the newspapers that's not filtered through the cult. The newspapers sort of play the role of Dumbledore in terms of giving her the information she needs that sort of helps her regroup and then return to the mission and escape. That was one of many, many parallels I saw between Robin and Harry, particularly from book 7.
Yeah, no, I think that's a really good parallel. I think because, Robin is so much the protagonist of Running Grave that, a lot of what happens to Harry in book 7 will sort of naturally happen to Robin in this case.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, the whole excursion to the cult was like the camping trip in terms of the isolation, the bad food, the everything, but Robin is completely alone, whereas Harry had Hermione and Ron, and that's just a huge contrast in how that whole system works out.
Yep. Okay. I think that's Strike and Robin.
Okay.
Unless we find Strike and Robin in any of the minor characters, aside from our main trio.
In terms of minor characters, I don't think you can ignore the physical similarities between Strike and Mad-Eye Moody. You've got the one-legged, broken nose, beaten up looking, big guys, war veterans with PTSD. That's both of them. So the first time I picked up the book and saw Strike, I was like, oh, we've got Mad-Eye Moody is going to be the hero of this book. And of course,
I remember that was kind of the perspective when we first started reading the Strike books. We're like, well, how about that? A book series all about Mad-Eye Moody.
But now he's sexy. I don't think Mad-Eye Moody's ever been sexy before.
No, Mad-Eye Moody was never sexy.
Maybe when he was younger. Who knows?
How do you know?
Good charisma. But his face did look, one of those, faces drawn by someone who had a vague idea of what a human being looked like.
I always find that a great description.
And when we hear about all Strike's hair, his hairy chest, his hairy butt, growing that beard for court.
We don't know he has a hairy butt. That's merely
he has a hairy
that's not
chest.
canon.
He has a hairy butt. Trust me on this one. But
you've done extensive research on that.
I studied hormones in graduate school.
Oh, so she did do extensive research.
She did. Yes.
Okay. But when he has that fast growing beard that he grows for court, I mean, I think we see a lot of Hagrid there with the big hairy guy.
I will say also that the Cormoran Strike audiobooks, Strike sounds a lot like Hagrid. Whenever I first listened to it, I was like, oh my god, they sound exactly the same.
That is, well, didn't Hagrid have a kind of a Cornish accent in the...
No, he has a West Country accent.
Okay,
it's not the same.
Not the same, okay.
To me, they sound similar, but I'm sure B is what are you even talking about?
Yeah.
No, I mean, they're both the West, the West and the South of England, but it shouldn't be the same.
Okay.
Shouldn't be exactly the same, okay.
Going on the Mad-Eye Moody tangent for a moment, but if Mad-Eye Moody is Strike, then I feel like Tonks could be Robin, at least in early books, not in terms of romance or anything like that, but just in terms of he's the mentor for Tonks, and also the fact that Robin always is like changing her appearance for different undercover things.
Yes.
And Tonks just passes that part of the aura training
Exactly.
with flying colours with it. Total ease. Yeah, that's nice.
And Tonks almost failed surveillance, right? And so Robin has to go take a course in that because her first surveillance job, she gets recognized.
Yeah, she gets seen. That's fun.
Yeah, luckily she's not as clumsy as Tonks is, because that would be bad.
Lots of issues. In terms of the mentor-mentee jumping to a rather different thing, I felt there was a Harry Dumbledore aspect of the Strike Robin relationship, of Strike being sort of completely effortlessly in charge at the beginning, and then obviously it's actually Harry who has to take over and solve it and solve the flaw in the plan at the end, and that way of Robin sort of stepping in and taking sort of full charge the first time in Ink Black Heart, and then in the obviously even more so in Running Grave.
Yeah, I like that with the fact that Robin, when she's in the cult, she is like completely separated from Strike for the first time in terms of all of her undercover work, and that she like is thinking of Strike in her head and like sort of having conversations there, and like, you know, is considering
a bit like post-death.
Like considering like what would Strike suggest that I do in this situation, but she makes her own decision. She decides for herself whether to listen to the Strike in her head or not. And
Harry does that too. I was chatting about this to some fellow Strike fans in Oxford, Tyler and Molly Brown, and they were linking the end of Ink Black Heart with the end of Book 6 in terms of the sort of immobility. And I was thinking, to me, that was a bit like... So he was thinking of Strike stabbed at the end of Ink Black Heart as like sort of Dumbledore, wandless and sort of powerless. But I thought of it slightly the other way, is Harry, who's completely immobile and powerless at the end of Half-Blood Prince, and a bit sulky about having to obey Dumbledore and not helping, and that sort of Strike grumpiness about having to stay in the car when Robin goes up to Zoe and things in the final confirmation. So there's that switch of mentor-mentee, Robin taking charge at the end of Ink Black Heart, and Dumbledore saying, "I'm not afraid, I'm with you." The most famous and popular switch of the mentor-mentee there. And I like that because it also reworking of the way in which Strike is absolutely textbook Dumbledore at the end of Lethal White. So Lethal White, we have Robin and Harry taken hostage by the person who's been pretending to be someone else, and then Strike and Dumbledore break through the door and save them at, as it were, gunpoint, wonder point. And that's a very close parallel. I think Lethal White really is the novel that is the strongest parallel, and that's another very strong Goblet of Fire. So it's quite nice having that sort of slight shift away from that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, Dumbledore is sort of the one I struggle to find in the Strike books as much, just because I don't think, like, an adult mystery series lends itself well to, a wise mentor with a beard.
Yeah, that's right. So you're not going to have someone all-knowing sort of sitting over it all with our protagonist sort of under them, but in the sense that there are aspects of that, I think it's in Strike's sort of control of the agency. And when Strike knows... So we do have a number of times when Strike knows something about who's the murderer, which we don't know, and in times which Robin doesn't know either. So I suppose that's quite Dumbledore-like.
Well, one connection I saw, in addition to Robin being a nice combination of Jenny and Hermione, I think there's a really strong dose of Dobby in her with that house elf efficiency. Especially in the first book, where she comes into the agency and she just sort of magically provides Strike with everything he needs. So first time he asks for information, she comes back with that 3-page paragraph about, the history of Luna Landry, more than he ever possibly could have imagined. She says, do you want coffee? And it's like, there is no coffee. And she said, sure. And 2 minutes later, she comes back with coffee and biscuits. I just reread the Ritz scene in Ink Black Heart, and Strike's remembering that. And he actually uses the word conjure up. She conjured up that coffee and those coffee and chocolate biscuits out of nowhere, which is very house elfy to me. And of course, she had that office spick and span the first day. She got it, completely clean, down to the smallest little details, scraping the handwritten name off the mailbox and putting a typewritten one, making sure he knew he owed her 43 pence for chocolate biscuits. That sort of unseen efficiency, because of course he was out that whole day, and so he comes back and this office is just spotless. I think that's very house elfy. And then there's also those surprising abilities, like in the Silkworm, where she suddenly has that ability to drive on a icy tarmac and just stuns Strike with that talent. And it's kind of like the elves having this completely unexpected but very powerful magic that everyone has completely underestimated. And finally, as was pointed out a number of years ago on Hogwarts Professor, the name Ellicott actually means elf cottage or elf house. And she in the box, she basically had to be her own Dobby in order to survive the torture in the basement. We sort of get, Dobby didn't turn up for her the way he did for, Hermione and Ron and Harry, and she kind of had to be her own Dobby in that moment to survive that ordeal. So I think there's definitely some Robin Dobby stuff.
I also like the idea of in that car chase scene when they're being shot at, that like she is just pulling out all of these incredible like magical moves with this car to like save them from that situation. And it makes me think also of that like Malfoy Manor escape scene, that it's like Dobby has these abilities that nobody else can, that allow them to escape from that place.
And what? Also, it's interesting that there's a prediction. In back when she first showed that ability back in the Silkworm, Strike tells her, "You drive like the people in the army who drive 5-star generals around and are trained to make an escape under gunfire." Mm-hmm. And then in book 6, she makes an escape under, book 7, she makes an escape under gunfire. And Harry tells Dobby back in book 2, never try to save my life again. And in book 7, he comes and he saves his life again. And thankfully for Robin, she didn't wind up like Dobby in doing it, but
yet.
Yes. Stop. I know. She's on your death list too, isn't she, Irving?
No. Robin is going to be the one person to live at the end.
Okay.
She'll just be standing there among the carnage.
Okay. All right. But yeah, so there's some definitely that magic when you need it role of Dobby. Robin definitely plays that at times.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Well, so that is Strike and Robin. We have apparently figured out that Strike and Robin are Harry, Ron, Hermione, Ginny, Dobby, Mad-Eye, and Dumbledore all in one. Woo! So, wow, is that an amalgamation? Hollywood would be proud. But I thought it'd be fun to talk about the supporting cast. I think one of my favorite elements of the last few Strike books has been, like, building out the other employees at the office.
Oh, absolutely, yes.
So, so, like, I thought we could sort of run down the contractors, one by one and sort of see, who they remind us of.
Okay, great.
Obviously, we start with Sam Barkley.
Awesome.
So for me, if sort of Strike is the Harry, then I think Barkley is the Ron to his Harry. He's, kind of like the best bro who's like a little more down to earth. He's not as into the, like, epic, like, Chosen One, battles of good and evil, like, fate of the world type stuff. Like, it reminds me of the Adil Amini interview that Joe did years ago, where she said that Ron is someone who does not grapple with anything deeper than beer if he can avoid it. And I was like, yep, that's strong Sam Barkley vibes.
Yeah, that's right. Well, Barkley's also a great source of humor and wisecracks. A little like Ron, but particularly I think like the Weasley twins, the role they play in terms of sort of leaning back against the wall with their arms crossed. Yeah, you need to learn to read the room, mate. That type of kind of wisecracking humor that's always, he's always there to provide. And I think that's a Weasley thing too.
Yeah. And like, to be clear, I don't think that, like, Barkley is, like, the third member of the trio. I think the series is sort of very clearly, like, Strike and Robin, the magic duo. Which, like, it's not the case in Harry Potter. So, like, this is very different. But just in the way that Barkley relates to Strike. Like, I could sort of see Harry and Ron, like, after, Auror training, like, going for a pint and having, like, the same kind of banter that these two do.
And I think that, completely ignoring all sexual tension between Hermione and Ron. Like, I think the sort of Robin-Barkley relationship has some similarities with Hermione and Ron in that Ron, I think, really respects Hermione's intelligence and, like, doesn't feel threatened by it. Like, it is totally fine with Robin being above him in school, being better than him at most things, And I think that with Barkley, I think we see that too. It's a really nice situation where it's like there's this man who has been in the agency, for a decent amount of time by that point, but who completely respects the fact that Robin is his senior, and even though he might traditionally have more experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, and he's the one man who's always willing to give Robin the full credit for everything she does, in terms of making sure she's acknowledged, hey, she's the one who figured this out. I just helped with this, or that type of stuff. So
yeah,
that's pretty cool.
Well, and the way that he, like, riffs on Robin, like, when he calls her a numpty for spilling her coffee, that felt very Ron.
Yeah.
Like, when Ron and Hermione are getting along, like, Ron often makes, like, sassy remarks to Hermione that are funny and that she takes very much in stride because she knows, like, they come from a good place.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, do we see anyone else in Barkley, or is he sort of pretty firmly Ron in this scenario?
Yeah, I'd say pretty firmly Ron. Nothing else really jumps out at me.
Yeah, same.
B, what about you? 2 cents on Sam Barkley?
No, the same. Ron, but also as Louise said, a strong twin vibe from Barkley of being a very subsidiary character who provides a lot of humour. And also, I love the way the twins are 100% on Harry's side, so we have the time when they say, very evil wizard coming through in 2, and when they when there's the meeting in 5, and they're like, incredibly aggressive to anyone who's nasty to is it Zachariah Smith or something who's unpleasant to Harry.
Yeah.
So that sense of Barkley's completely loyal.
Am I remembering correctly? Was there, like, an agency meeting where everyone kept, like, ragging on, I think, Robin, and Barkley was like, okay, people, lay off her?
I think that's sort of right, but my may be wrong, but I think it's Pat. It's Pat who defends Strike.
Is it?
There's one where they're all really grumpy about the fact that Strike's laid up upstairs.
Yes, yeah, that's it.
Yeah, and I think Barkley actually joins in briefly that he's also fed up. And it's actually Pat who steps in and says, come on. He's not choosing to be up there with a croc leg. So, yeah.
Fair enough.
But I agree with you. I think Barkley should have been there, but I feel it's wrong way. Slightly,
that's what I'd expect from Barkley.
I think he slightly steps down there, but I may be wrong.
Okay, what about Midge? Because I actually think I get very strong Ginny vibes from Midge.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Right? Specifically, I'm thinking back to her arguments with Strike in Running Grave, where she was 100% right and he was 100% wrong. And the way that she's not afraid to challenge, anyone, whoever the leader is.
Yeah. No, I agree.
Like, sort of the way...
she's, if you have enough nerve, you can do anything kind of character. And her just dashing out of the bushes... the Jake
exactly
girls.
Yeah. And if we think of Strike as Ron and Midge as Ginny, there's that same like, what right do you have to comment on my love life or like
fraternal. Yeah. And there's definitely Midge rubs Strike up the wrong way because they're like each other aspect, isn't there? Of their
yeah.
Well. Also in the last book, Midge felt a little bit dissed that she was not getting to be as much a part of the action as she wanted, which reminded me of Jenny in Deathly Hallows, where she's wanting to fight in the last battle.
Exactly, the bit where she has to film it with the Franks when they're defending Tasha from the Franks, and they say, Midge, instead of being in there bashing the Franks, you've got to be filming it.
And and so. Yeah, I can definitely see Midge playing Quidditch for the Harpies.
Oh, totally!
Oh, hell yeah!
Those muscular arms. She's gonna be whipping those bludger bats around and just knocking people off their brooms and everything like that. Yeah. But
also, like the way Midge and Ginny can be very caustic. When they're having an argument, like, in the argument that she has with Strike in Running Grave, the argument that Ginny has with Ron in Half-Blood Prince, like, they go for the jugular. Yeah. Like, they go absolutely below the belt. Like, just because the best kiss you've had is from Auntie Muriel, and it's like, damn!
Yeah, but in both cases, they're not wrong, are they? Exactly.
Oh, they're not wrong. They are 100% right.
And, I never really get Strike's point there with Midge having a relationship with Tasha. In what way is this endangering the agency? And in the same, your relationship with Bijou absolutely has endangered the agency. You slept with a suspect in one. Yes, the tabloids would be interested, but it's just...
He never sleeps with a client. I think that's the issue. I think there's sort of an ethical issue of sleeping with a client.
It is, but it is I don't know. Obviously, it's not completely unreasonable, but she's a client in a different kind of way, isn't she? She's just asking for protection, so it's not like, she could be guilty of something or...
Yeah.
Right. Like, fully consenting adults, no one is suspected of murder, like, what is
the issue is that the agency, like, that that journalists are trying to find dirt on Strike at that specific moment and trying to imply that he sleeps with his clients in general. So, like, it's really because of that moment in time.
Maybe he should stop sleeping around so much then.
But I just don't
Maybe
see...
if Strike wasn't such a slut, we wouldn't be in this
but like,
problem.
you can't judge Strike on that more than, like, I feel like that is a little harsh.
But I just think with the Midge, why would anyone know? She's meant to be protecting her. So she's in the house as her bodyguard, as it were. Why would anyone know that they would have a relationship?
Because the tabloids in England are terrible, and you take a photo and then you create a story out of it. People make up stuff. So I understand why he's upset. He doesn't.
If they would make it up anyway, why should? Anyway.
Yeah, exactly. Like, all you need is a slightly suggestive photo. You don't actually need it to be true.
The issue for me, just to defend Strike a bit here, he's had any number of occasions where these women getting divorced who are in a very vulnerable situation, he's trying to get dirt on their husbands for them so they can, salvage themselves financially. When you are a client of a private detective, you're in a vulnerable position. I mean, in some ways, it's almost like, to me, it's sort of like a healthcare situation. There's a relationship there where, in some ways, the detective has kind of a power. There's a power imbalance. Strike goes out of his way never to respond to any of these overtures he ever gets from these female clients who he is helping, both during the cases and, in the immediate aftermath of the cases. And Midge, even though the power imbalance is not as obvious in a lesbian relationship as it is in a man-woman relationship, I think there is that ethical concern about she's our client. At least as long as she is our client, she is off limits as far as romantic partner, in the same way, a doctor's client or a therapist's client or something like that would be. So I think that is the core issue.
I don't think that's unreasonable. But I don't think, that's not the reason Strike's not sleeping with Miss Jones. We've never had any sense that he's thinking, oh, I really would like to sleep with this woman, but I mustn't for ethical reasons. He's not interested in any of them.
He's not interested, but I think there is that. Even if he was, she's off limits.
I think that's true, but I do think Tasha is not vulnerable in the same way, just because this is because it's a bodyguard situation, not my husband has been cheating on me.
But it's like emotionally vulnerable. Like it's a situation where it's like she is in high stress and is and could
it shouldn't really be starting until after, but I've no problem whatever. The moment they've caught the Franks, then that's fine, and you can have a relationship.
If there were a male detective in that same role as kind of providing those bodyguard services, and that male detective started sleeping with her, I think we'd be a little bit squeamish about it.
There's a whole film, isn't there, in which...
Yeah, isn't there like a whole genre?
There is. And I don't think it's generally thought as bad in that. But
Yes, but people find a lot of things attractive that in the real world are a little bit sketch. So, I do agree.
Fiction.
What?
This is still fiction.
This is still fiction, but it's supposed to be like realistic fiction. It's not like genre. It's not like a romance novel in that same way. I agree. If it was a male detective, I think we would feel differently, because I think she's emotionally vulnerable. It's a situation where she is going to be placing a lot of, she is so scared that she is going to be putting whoever is protecting her in this really hero role in her eyes. And I think it's just, someone could take advantage of that.
But that's not really what Strike's having a go at her about, is it?
No, but I think what he's having a go at her about is fair in its own way of let's not give the press anything more to dig their teeth into right now. Let's, be as professional as possible.
Yeah, I think that's true, but I think Strike has endangered them for absolutely no reason whatsoever, just for somebody he's not interested in.
But he had no way of knowing that it would endanger the agency.
But it has endangered the agency, so really he's crossed it himself. Whereas Tasha, as far as we know, Midge and Tasha want a real relationship. This is something actually valuable.
But
it seems to me.
Strike doesn't know that in that situation. He doesn't know that. But I think he has some points. But anyway, I think we're getting on a tangent here. Midge is Ginny. Moving.
She's happy to fight below the belt.
Midge is Ginny and she is right.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. And so, then we get to Dev, right? And so, is Dev the Neville of the group?
I don't see it.
He sort of seems like quieter, soft-spoken. Obviously, Dev is Neville after he long-bottomed in the last book, because, he's famously attractive.
The honey trap hottie.
I don't see Dev as personality-wise much like Neville. He's to me, he's not so much soft-spoken. He's got that very deadpan, first of all, sense of humor. Like when he was playing the art dealer and he was like, Mr. McGovey is very discreet about his clients. Mr. McGovey always gives fair prices. That deadpan humor, that doesn't remind me of Neville. And the other thing I was thinking about is, when Strike first asks him to go tail Jago Roth, and he is immediately suspicious, are you trying to screw me over the same way Patterson did in terms of giving me off-the-book jobs that are your own personal agenda and not paying me for them. And that sort of suspicious nature, again, not really Neville for me. So
no, but I felt there was a connection there of Neville standing up to them in the first book. You know, where Neville says you can't go out, and Dev does stand up to him. He doesn't just accept that this is right because Strike says it's right. He says, "Well, actually, I don't think this is right."
That's a good point. But yeah.
But
I don't see a lot of personality connections between Neville and Dev the same way I do with Midge and with Barkley.
I agree. I don't really see much personality connections. I see Dev has a little bit more of like the Harry and Hermione of like he definitely is someone who has strong morals and like wants to like stick with them. But honestly, okay, I don't have much to back this up, but he gives off a bit of Dean Thomas to me.
Oh.
In that we don't get a ton of Dean Thomas in the series, but I wrote an article about why Dean Thomas is one of my favorite side characters, because what we do get is he's quiet, like he is a little bit in the background, but he is like very loyal, always there for Harry, like, and even after Harry like basically steals his girlfriend. I mean, not completely, but like we see Dean Thomas in book 7 is really supportive of Harry and is like, yeah, I think Harry's the real deal. And he like joins the Order of the Phoenix even when Seamus, when his best friend doesn't, and like, sorry, not Order of the Phoenix, Dumbledore's army. And I don't think I can't quite put my finger on why I think there's a connection there, but there's just something about quiet, handsome, like kind person who's just there, who's there for them.
A very background character. You know, those are both very small characters, and Dev definitely is one of the really smaller subcontractors, but who you feel are morally correct, and they're following their own path. And you feel you could totally rely on them and trust them.
The one Dev-Neville connection that might be there, and I think we're going to have to wait to see how this plays out in future books. Recall when Dev had that very strong reaction to Will when he found out Will had impregnated Lynn when she was underage. And he had, Strike and Robin, recognize this is a cult situation. This is a very coercive situation. He may not have had a lot of choice. There's some understanding. He doesn't seem to have forced anything on Lynn. Dev is like very black and white. No way. He slept with an underage girl. He is scum. He deserves to go down for this. That sort of reminds me of Neville's early reactions, both like when he saw the Cruciatus curse in Lethal White, and there was one other time when I think it was Malfoy said something that really upset Neville, and Neville almost attacked him.
Oh, about St. Mungo's.
When he referenced crazy people in St. Mungo's.
Related to his parents and their memory loss and their being hospitalized. So I am wondering if there isn't something that will come up in Dev's background, that some reason he had a very strong reaction to that statutory rape.
Oh, that's a really good theory.
I agree.
And that may be the Neville in him, is that, oh yes, there's some reason he's having these strong reactions that we don't fully know about yet. It'd be cool if that was the case.
I really like that.
And it would be good also, wouldn't it, for just getting Dev as a more full-on character if he has a traumatic backstory that we discover about. Because, she's always saying, I have massive backstories for all my characters, but we haven't really had anything for Dev yet.
Yeah, Dev is sort of very much still like the, Neville in book 3, like a fun character we like, who's like there, but who doesn't have much going on of his own. So yeah, I think we're due for a revelation there. Okay, and that brings us to Louise's favorite character, Pat.
Pat.
Which, I mean, let's be honest, class all her own. There is no parallel for Pat. Oh, what an icon.
Yeah, I think, Pat is wonderful. It's funny, before I saw the actress who plays her in the TV series, who I think does a great job at that, I always kind of envisioned Dame Maggie Smith in that role, in terms of the
little bit
no-nonsense type of personality. I mean, not with the upper class speech and accent that we usually see associated with Dame Maggie Smith, but if she could do this more working class type of character, I think she would have been great in that part. So maybe a little connection with McGonagall there, and that, Dame Maggie Smith was the perfect McGonagall. I think she'd have been a great portrayer of Pat.
I think there's a little bit, there's a very tiny bit of McGonagall and Pat, and the way I see that is like that McGonagall very clearly does not want to show favorites. Is very I'm not gonna show favorites for any students, but you see these little ways that she's showing favoritism to Harry, and that she really likes Harry. And I think we see that with Pat, that Pat really doesn't want to show Strike that she actually likes him, but we see all of these tiny little moments in which her facade breaks a little bit, and you're oh, she actually really likes Strike.
We could have a link there, couldn't we, of McGonagall giving Harry biscuits and Pat giving Strike
yes,
I was going to say, have a fruitcake,
Strike.
Yeah, well, because the Book 5 villain is trying to spike Harry's drinks, poison him, in Janice's case, give him Veritaserum, but then you have Pat and McGonagall giving him no, here's something good for you to eat.
Yeah.
Okay.
All checks out.
There is Pat really, she is a very maternal figure, isn't she? I mean, in many ways, I think she's the most maternal figure of the series that we get. We discover that when we finally see inside her own house, and she's the only subcontractor who we've seen at home. And her family is so important to her, and she's been bringing up her own children and her children's children for a long time now, and she takes Will under her wing, and we have a sort of inklings of that when she brings Strike the chicken soup in Troubled Blood, but I feel it's coming through. So I suppose that maternal role as Molly Weasley would be the obvious one in Strike. And they both got a no-nonsense about them to an extent.
Yeah. The other parallel I could see, and really this is me just trying to match up the golden and silver trios to our contractors, but I see a little bit of Luna in Pat.
It's a sort of truth bombs.
She's definitely a little bit out there, marches to the beat of her own drum. But also in the way she relates to Strike, initially Pat does not make a favorable impression, and Strike, is not thrilled. Just when Harry meets Luna, he's okay, bit weird. But then once you see her in action and you see how brave and loyal they are, then our protagonist is oh wait, no, I'm ride or die for them, let's go.
And I think a little bit of Ron's reaction to Luna, where at first he's just who is this crazy girl? And then over time he's she's actually growing on me. I'm not gonna think she's loony anymore.
Yeah.
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 Have we got anyone in Harry Potter who keeps a secret that isn't harmful? I suppose Percy, when he keeping the secret, who's going out with?
Yes, Percy in Chamber of Secrets.
Yeah.
It's quite an unusual thing to do, isn't it, to have a secret that is bad, not a bad sign.
Lupin and Tonks kind of keep their relationship secret.
Well, the Weasley twins are blackmailing Ludo Bagman.
That's true.
I mean, that isn't a good. That isn't a good.
Yeah.
It's an interesting one.
Depends who you ask.
What's a little blackmail?
But yeah, maybe it's a bit like Lupin being a werewolf. The adults do know about that. But yeah, it's an interesting way. I think it's unusual to have something that's a secret that turns out not to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Well, Well, Irvin, you mentioned before that Dumbledore was sort of in a class of his own with no obvious parallel in Strike. Could we have a connection between Pat and Dumbledore, even on just the older generation with wisdom to share type role for them? Is there any?
I'm leaning towards no, because part of what makes Dumbledore Dumbledore is the way other people view him as, like, peerless. He's so much older, so much wiser, so much more powerful that sort of, like, everyone will look up to him as a mentor. With Pat, even though she might be older and wiser, like, you know, they're all still very much adults. Like, I think they view her, like, as a peer, even if an older and wiser peer. So I don't think the relationship quite works.
Okay, well, this brings me actually to my death prediction. I am thinking Pat might not survive the series. And I hate that, of course, because she's my favorite character.
No!
But I am wondering, it's those lungs of hers. For a lot of reasons, I think we're going to see a lot of parallels to the Silkworm in Book 8. And I'm not going to go into the reasons for that right now. But, you know, I was just reading the Silkworm and how Liz Tassel was struggling to breathe, having knackered her own lungs at the end of that book. And I am thinking we might lose Pat to some sort of respiratory ailment before the series ends. Like, I mean, she's got that Night Court bailiff thing going on with her voice and her raspy throat and her constant smoking. And you guys may all be too young to remember the original Night Court, but, you know, they had old raspy voiced women as serving as their bailiffs for the first couple of seasons, and 2 of them died of lung cancer before after only 1 season, and they had to get someone younger and healthier in. But I am thinking that Pat is not going to live to a ripe old age.
No.
She already has.
I mean, she's not that old.
She's 67.
Irvin, come on.
You realize, look at the gray hair here. You can't be talking about
youthful.
Someone that age.
Yeah.
Louise, haven't you been the one saying I am not her age? Just to be clear, I am nowhere near her age.
I am nowhere near her age, but I am close enough to it that ripe old age is not a ripe old age is not 67. I'm sorry.
No, definitely not.
You're the one trying to kill off. I mean, you found a death that Irvin doesn't go with, so
even I am shocked and appalled by this. Louise, how could you?
Oh yeah, said from the man who wants to kill off Jack, Nick, and Ilsa. Yeah, right.
Yeah.
I would so much rather lose Jack, Nick, and Ilsa than lose Pat.
I don't think we're losing Pat. I think she'll be exactly. She's too
I
sad.
don't think we're losing Pat, but I think there is some possibility that she will have some sort of issue, or like maybe some sort of issue where she has to quit smoking like Strike has, and that she's like really grumpy about it and whatever. But I don't think we're losing her within the books. Yeah, she's just too important, I think. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I was gonna say that I just thought that there are some Pat Hagrid connections in that, like, they both seem pretty gruff on the outside, but then underneath are, like, big softies and have that sort of maternal instinct to them. And also there's the funny thing where Hagrid, like, they're all of these, like, vicious creatures that everyone is like, oh my god, like, how could anyone love this? And Hagrid is like, isn't it so fluffy? And, like, with Pat, it's kind of the opposite, where there are these like super handsome men who suck underneath, and she's like, wow, they're so handsome, and everyone's like, what are you talking about? They're terrible. Where they just like don't have great judgment or like either care too much or too little about the surface appearances.
And that works quite well also with her not dying.
Amazing.
Because Hagrid was never going to die. That was just one of
True.
those, you know, as to
There's a risk, but he doesn't. Yeah.
I'm still mad about that.
You crazy bitch. You wanted to kill off Hagrid.
I think that's a great connection.
Let's not get into this.
Literally, if I could change one thing about the series, I would kill off Hagrid.
If the Hagrid connection saves her, I'm all for it. I would happily be wrong on that one. But
No, but that's a really good parallel. I really like that one. And like, that also works with her being like, you know, older and wiser, but still very much like, you know, one of the gang.
Yeah, that's a nice connection, isn't it? Yeah.
And even the deep rumbling voice. Oh, she does have those collection of little crystal animals. So she's like maybe a care of magical creatures person in her home. Okay.
Luckily, she's actually good at cooking and baking, though. Unlike Hagrid.
Yes, that is good. That is good.
All right, I think we can wind down. I
did want to throw in, even though he's not a subcontractor, if we could throw in Shanker really quickly.
Yeah, let's do it.
I think he's who Mundungus Fletcher would have been if Mundungus wasn't a complete coward. So the sort of the criminal element that our heroes need on their side, who comes in real handy at times. So I think there's a
And Mundungus Fletcher turned out not to be very nice. The Shanker's kind of a new shinier Mundungus Fletcher.
Yeah.
And I just wanted to say on the subcontractors that there's an obvious general parallel, which is the rotating Defense of Dark Arts teacher that you get. Obviously, it enables new characters to come in, but it also means that there's often a bad one, and we've had that with Nutley, Morris, and then Little John is the one where the badness becomes, you know, sort of as it were, plot relevant. But that's always the case with the dark arts teachers. You think, well, because they're new, does that mean that they're the bad guy? And often they were.
And the question is, do we think that the curse has been broken like it was after book 7 of Harry Potter?
No, I think the curse won't be broken until book 10. I think, book 10, they finally get a subcontractor, and the subcontractor turns out to be a good subcontractor, and he's invited to the wedding, gets full employment.
I quite like Pat as the breaking of that, in the sense of she's the one who, when she arrives, Strike thinks, I want to get rid of her immediately, and then it turns out that actually, when she could get rid of her, he wants to keep her after all.
I feel like in that, Pat sort of plays Slughorn's role, where like you think she's part of the subcontracting mess, but no, she's going for another position, and then it turns out we like her.
Yeah, she's going to decide it.
And just one other supporting character, we mentioned Pat as kind of a Molly Weasley maternal figure. I think we have to also remember Linda Ellicott in that role. She's a ample red-haired woman, sometimes overprotective mother. I think there's some definite Molly Weasley parallels.
Yeah. Her mollycoddling, like her being like, no, Robin, you can't go out and do things. And she's like, well, who's going to save the world if I don't? Yeah. That's very strong Molly Weasley energy. But
also correct in that Robin is in real danger. I mean, she's not incorrect to be concerned about her. How many times has Robin almost gotten killed? About as many as Harry now. So
there's also the connection of like, when Mrs. Weasley thinks that Hermione has been like toying with Harry's heart, she like totally turns on Hermione. And I think we see that with Linda and Strike, that she like turns on Strike, and unfortunately it doesn't just take Robin saying, there's no reason to do that for it to change. Because unfortunately, Linda is right that there is romantic tension between Strike and Robin, whereas she was wrong about Harry and Hermione.
Yeah. But wait, does that mean that Michael Ellicott, like Arthur Weasley, was meant to die, but Joe's gonna spare him?
Because you definitely felt that was that near-death experience. That we had, is the Arthur version.
See, I'm predicting not a death. I am evolving.
And we're all pleased to see this character development.
Thank you. All right. Well, on that note, I think we're about done with our strike panel. This has been so much fun. And it's also, like, I've really loved getting to talk about, like, the series as a whole instead of, the specific books or whatnot. Because, we haven't really had a chance to catch up on the first few books. So, yeah. I'm so glad you guys could join us again for our strike panel.
Thanks you so much for inviting us. And I completely agree. It's really nice to have a really wide-ranging conversation like this.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And the characters, the characters in all of Rowling's work are just what makes it for me. And so getting to discuss different facets of these characters in, little bits and pieces over the series as a whole, that's just so much fun. And that's just a perfect pub conversation to have in a podcast like this.
Exactly. So where can our listeners find you guys out on the interwebs? I know you are both quite prolific in writing about both Harry Potter and Strike.
Yeah, so I can be found on Twitter at Beatrice Groves 1, and at the head of that, my pinned tweet links to all my blogs, but I can also be found at MuggleNet as Batilda's Notebook.
Okay. I am at LMF3B on Twitter, and I have the Farting Sofa Faculty Lounge blog, which is www.fartingsofafaculty.blogspot.com. And also, if you'd rather subscribe, it's at www.fartingsofafaculty.substack.com. And that's where you're most likely to find me talking about Strike.
Louise, is the 3B for 3 broomsticks? Rock on.
No, it is not. 3B was years ago. That was a random thing that was assigned at one of my university email accounts, which is no longer active, but I've kept it for years. So no, I'm sorry. It
fate.
Long predated. It predated Potter, not just.
You could have just said yes.
It was fated to be that you would come on our podcast.
That's right. It was a future prediction.
Yeah, exactly. It was meant to be.
Yeah. It was a prophecy.
Yes. Do you guys have anything you want to plug? Because I can think of a project that 3 of us are involved in that we should plug.
Definitely.
Well, I don't know what order you want to do things in, but 2 things I always like to plug. Queen City Mischief and Magic Festival, awesome, entirely generic and non-copyright infringing festival in Stanton, Virginia, last week in September. Next year will be its 10th year. It is awesome. Everybody ought to come. And also, I always like to put in a plug for the Harry Potter Academic Conference. Great place to share ideas. It's every October. Next year, it is online, so it's accessible all over the world. So please check that out. And if you have a scholarly essay about Potter or about Strike, too, they accept Strike papers, please submit that, because I would love to see more Strike there.
Yeah. Do you have the dates for that for next year?
I do not have the dates, but if you just keep an eye on their website, I don't think the dates have been set for either of those yet.
All right. I can look it up.
It's usually sort of mid-October, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah. The Queen City Mischief and Magic is usually the last weekend in September. I think it's usually the second or third weekend in October for the Harry Potter Academic Conference.
And on the books front, so just 2 relatively recent publications, which are, again, a few of us are in. The Lana A. Whitehead, The Ivory Tower, Harry Potter and Beyond, more essays on the works of J.K. Rowling, is an amazingly wide-ranging, masses of good essays in there. And then also the Potterversity book.
Mm-hmm.
All right.
Awesome. And then...
Now,
the upcoming...
Louise, tell us about the book that all 3 of us are in.
Oh, I get to tell us about this? Okay.
Sure.
The Phoenix and the Flame. It is a book of essays published by the Rowling Library that takes a in-depth look at the original outlines for Order of the Phoenix that J.K. Rowling made available online a number of years ago. And there are multiple people, including Irvin B. and myself, who have essays in there looking at various aspects of these early outlines, and then the eventual book that we got, and looking at how that transition happened. That was actually the subject of my last Chestnut Hill talk. It was very well received. I was very happy about that. I think there are people interested in the book there. Irvin, I specifically got to plug your chapter because someone during the question and answer session asked about Bellatrix.
Yay!
And I said, well, buy the book and you have to read Irvin's chapter. So
I very much appreciate that.
That will be coming out at some point. I don't think we have the exact date yet, though.
No, so we were told it's coming out Q4 2024, so
soon, you think?
Soon it will be out, and when it is, we will link to it.
Yeah.
I don't know that that's true. Mostly because I asked, because I'm presenting my thing at Conjuration in mid-November, and I asked the editor, I was like, is there going to be anything I can actually show at my presentation in mid-November? He's like,
there's a cover.
No. Yes, there's a beautiful cover.
Yeah.
Can you pre-order?
There is not a pre-order.
Not yet. Okay.
But there might be by the time this goes out.
Not yet.
Yeah, so check.
Yes. So we will update as we go.
There's a website, and you can sign up to be notified when the book is published. That's the only thing we have right now. And I do have that website in the show notes.
We'll link to that. All right. Fantastic. And with that, we also want to give another huge thanks to Caroline Oberlander, who bought us this round of drinks at the Three Broomsticks. Thank you so much again, Carolina. Yay! Listeners, if you want to buy us the next round, please head over to patreon.com/3broomsticks with the numeral 3 to sign up. Again, there's a lot of fun stuff there. Sophia and I recently did the first of a many-part discussion about how to throw good Harry Potter parties, because we are both rather expert at it.
Yep, that was fun.
It was a very good time. And listeners, you can also help us out by rating and reviewing us. If you like our show, please tell your friends, tell your acquaintances, tell your family, tell people on the street. Word of mouth is a big help, and we'd really love to see it. And in the meantime, you can find us on social media. We are on Twitter. Actually, I think we and our guests are on Twitter. There's a thriving Strike community there, so definitely come join in the fun there. But our podcast is also on Instagram and Facebook and TikTok, depending on the day. I'm never quite sure. Our assorted handles and email address can be found in the episode description or the website. That website is 3broomstickspod.com with the 3 spelled out. There you'll find all of the links to all of the essays and all the books we've mentioned. You can submit topics. We just made our plan for next year, and we're definitely going to take all the submitted topics into consideration. And please let us know your thoughts on this episode. Let us know, what character parallels you find in the Strike series, who you think corresponds to whom, and who you think is going to die in the next Strike book, because that's what we really want to hear about. And next time we meet at the Three Broomsticks, we are going to be discussing Order of the Phoenix, Chapter 23, Christmas on the Closed Ward.
One of my favorites.
And with that, okay, so I'm going to give a little tease, a little spoiler alert. It is everyone's favorite, so we have literally the entire hosting panel of the Three Broomsticks on that episode.
And it's quite long. You will get a lot of info.
Just no one wanted to stay away from that one. So with that, I'm Irvin.
I'm Sophia.
Thank you so much for listening. We'll see you next time at the Three Broomsticks. Cheers!
Give me big old buckets of butterbeer. Give me big old barrels of butterbeer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here. Give me big old buckets of butterbeer. Give me big old barrels of butterbeer. Give me the drink I love so dear. And another round for my friend right here. Of the sweet old butterbeer.
This episode of The Three Broomsticks was edited by Patrick Musilek. The theme song was written and performed by The Faithful Sidekicks. Make sure to check them out at thefaithfulsidekicks.com.
Oh, crap. Where'd my internet go? Shh.